Well, welcome everybody to the 2023 Washington Trails Caucus. I will say conference. I really am glad that you're here, and I really want to thank Alan Coburn and Tom Helberg for sponsoring our stay today in this great facility. We're very excited to find it. We're also excited to find it because it offers us the opportunity for the first time to try live streaming. So we'll see how the experiment goes, and hopefully that will is the way of the future, as we have learned in the past. But thank you all for coming. We're very, very pleased to be here. First of all, we acknowledge that the original inhabitants of this land, the Duwamish, the Muckleshoot, and the Cayuse, Umatilla, and Walla Walla tribes, since time immemorial, they have hunted, fished, gathered on, and taken care of these lands and waters. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and honor their sacred and spiritual connection to the land and the water. We will strive to be honest about our past mistakes and bring about a future that includes their people, stories, and voices to form a more just and equitable society. We open our time together by honoring the ancestors whose feet and paddles forged the trails that we use today. These lands, now known as King County, were home to these people. We are grateful to the continued work of these people groups to restore the land and honor their history and culture. We thank you. So I realized in my agenda that I left 5 minutes for people to talk. So I'm going to stop here. I will do board introductions for the board members who are present today at the lunch break. And at the moment, I'd like to introduce Ted Wilhite, who will do our more formal.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2023 Washington State Trails Caucus. My job here today is to do 3 things, actually. 1 is to welcome you, 2 to make some brief comments about the issues that are in front of us, 3 to get off the stage so that you can do your work. I want to welcome you to this conference. I've seen some of the agenda items. I know some of the speakers, and by the way, some of the speakers aren't here yet, but I've seen the presentations before, and I think if you haven't seen it before, I think you're going to be really, really impressed, particularly with the state comprehensive outdoor recreation plan that we've spent the last several years working on. Now, what I'd like to do is just open by saying it's a real treat for me to be here. I love being around people who care about trails. I love being around people who care about communities. I love people who are making a commitment to the future. And of course, that's everyone in this room. And also what's a treat to me is I see a lot of old friends from the governor's office, friends from the Evergreen Coalition, and other people who are really devoted to the focus of this conference. Now, I think that one of the things I'd like to do is talk about some of the challenges that are facing those of us who work in this area. We've been through the pandemic. We're about a year out of the pandemic. And I think we're in a situation that we were not in before the pandemic. We're in a new normal. And what is that new normal? What are the challenges that we are facing today that we didn't face before the pandemic? And a number of them come to mind. The first, of course, is the unprecedented growth in the number of users of trails, parks, and recreation facilities. It's absolutely unprecedented. The numbers have gone down. The trail managers tell me that the user counts have gone down a little bit, but they're still higher, and they're going to continue. Well, how do we deal with that? I don't know the answers, but we have to recognize the reality of much more intensive use going forward. Another change, I think, is the kinds of users There are kinds of people who are enjoying these activities. In the past, trails were for mainly, soft trail users like me, or cyclists, and I cycle as well, and equestrians. But now we're seeing a different kind of use. We're seeing electric bikes, for example. We're seeing long distance trail runners. We're seeing XKs on our trails. We're seeing electric SUVs. We're seeing all different kinds of users. And everyone is welcome, but how do we accommodate the different kinds of users and user conflicts issues? How do we handle that going forward? My own view is that there's room for everybody, but there's not room for everybody at the same time in the same place. So how do we deal with that? And how do we deal with the interests of people who don't want to develop? And I'm talking about, of course, the tribes, the sovereign tribes and their interests, and they need to be listened to. And that's the difference that we have to recognize. And I think going forward, we have to talk about the realities of trail management. How are we going to pay for it? And the new trails, how are we going to maintain them? What do we do about the old trails? Now, in this last legislative cycle, the trails community actually did pretty well. There were a number of funds that were available that haven't been available in the past. Well, is that going to continue? I don't know the answer to that. Okay, we have to prepare for all of these opportunities. Now, in terms of trails, one of the themes that is really important to me is that my belief is that trails are part of the infrastructure of our state. They're part of the infrastructure, and we need to recognize that, and we need to be proud of that. And in terms of the physical infrastructure, the data show in Washington State, we have more than, this is unbelievable to me, 23,000 miles of trails in Washington State. And that's a wonderful opportunity that we have as citizens to enjoy that. And I think when we talk about infrastructure and trails, I think it's important in our conversations and in our outreach to elected officials and to the general public to talk about the economic contribution that trails make to our economy. And the data are that these 23,000 miles of trails contributes about $8 billion and 81,000 jobs a year. It's an astonishing number. And I think as trail advocates and users of trails, we need to inform the public of this economic benefit. Now, as you know, I chair the Recreation and Conservation Funding Board, and we've been around along with the RCO as a result of a citizens initiative that was passed about 60 years ago. And when you look at the investment that have been made by the state of Washington in trails, in critical habitat, in farmland preservation, land and water conservation, the data, the dollars over the past 60 years are in trails alone, it's $300 million. $300 million in 3,000 projects. And overall, when you talk about all these programs, the critical habitat and farmland, and soccer fields, and archery ranges, and every amenity that's associated with that, the state of Washington has invested $3 billion in this infrastructure. That's an incredible amount of money. And it's a total of more than 11,000 grants. And one of the advantages of living in Washington, we've had a legislature and a governor who has supported the activities that we are all involved in. Well, how is that going to continue going forward? What steps are we going to take to make sure that that level of funding continues? And when we talk about trails, I think it's important to recognize the health benefits. The people who do this kind of work say that more than $390 million annually are developed as a result of the health benefits of outdoor recreation. So I think we have to recognize that infrastructure means trails, and trails mean business. Recreation and conservation means jobs. Recreation and conservation is part of our infrastructure. I think another challenge that we all have to talk about going forward is, what is a trail? Is a trail something that's remote or up in the mountains? Or are we going to have to consider new trails? New trails that start in local communities, new trails that start in underserved communities, trails that are available for people who don't have the means to travel, or don't have the financial ability, or have been underserved historically. How are we going to put trails in those communities? Again, I don't know the answer to that. I think another challenge, and I was really impressed with the agenda, is that one of the things we have to do is reach out to the new communities. How do we develop working relationships with new users? And how do we develop that and strengthen? Again, I don't know the answers. And I thought your plan acknowledgement, Lisa, was very appropriate. How do we reach out to the tribal nations in ways that we have not done in the past? Again, a question, I don't know the answer, but these are conversations that we must have with Native Americans, sovereign nations. They should be treated as such. And so how do we do that going forward? So I think that in terms of going forward here, I want to say just a couple of other comments. The work that you are doing here is really, really important. It's really, really important. It's fun. That's the other part of it. But it's really important. The trails can't take care of themselves. The trails don't speak for themselves. That's our job. Your job, my job, everyone's job. And when you leave a trail, you don't really leave. You have an obligation to provide it to make sure that that trail continues. And that's part of your work here. And I hope in this conference and in the work that you do, you retain a sense of hope and optimism. There's a lot of bad things that are going on in the world, but this is an area where we have some control of some really positive things in terms of dealing with the community and dealing with the future. Now, the last reason that I'm here is a simple one, and that's to say we are here to listen. And when I say we, I mean Conservation Funding Board, Recreation Conservation Office, and the state of Washington. We are here to listen to what you have to say, and there will be an output and a product as a result of this conference. We want to hear your ideas, your suggestions, your comments, your criticisms, your thoughts on preserving that. We don't have to develop trails everywhere, but we need your comments and thoughts on where to go in the future. So I'm here to listen. I said I would keep my comments short and I would get out of here. Thank you all for attending and happy trails. Have a great conference. Thank you all.
I think as our first panel starts coming up, on just some basic housekeeping items. You may have noticed the restrooms are right behind us outside in the lobby. There's water out there. Please help yourself to snacks. I know my sweetie would be happy if I took them all home, but I wouldn't be happy if I took them all home again. And then when you leave, we have a basket for your lanyards so that you don't have another lanyard in your closet. But these guys look like they're ready. Again, everyone, lovely to see you all today on Mercer Island. My name is Melanie Baker. I'm the advocacy coordinator at Washington Trails Association, and very excited to moderate our panel this morning. We have 4 guests who are going to share 4 different perspectives on getting youth and other communities outdoors. So obviously trails and other hard infrastructure are essential for people to access the outdoors. But that's not the only element. There's also a social element and other barriers that youth and communities face in terms of knowledge or role models, or well, I'll let the panel talk about it, but that's what they're here to do. So we do have an hour and a half, which is a great amount of time for
us to do introductions to everyone in their organizations. And then I will ask a series of questions of the panel, and then we will have time, probably 15 minutes or so for questions from all of you and those folks that are online as well. Can let us know any questions. So we're gonna be talking about activating green spaces and public lands through programs. And first up, I'll introduce Lorelei Feldschlin. From some Holiday Outdoors. So Lorelei, this is the full space with you, your organization, and what you all are up to. Yeah. Okay. Gonna be first here.
Yeah, so there we go. There's our mission. So we really focus on working with youth, primarily in the South, with the exception of over the summer, we do run trips that we'll get to, which is all over Washington State. But we work primarily in the South, working with youth, typically who don't always have access to our outdoor spaces, whether it's our youth that are like really young, like our 4 to 6, who are just learning how to be outside, how to explore. We approach that from a outdoor education stance of just letting those youth kind of like in a way run their own trip. We just follow along and guide them and teach, but if they want to climb on top of a log, they climb on top of a log. And if they want to stop and talk about the slug that's in the middle of the trail and make everybody else walk around them, that sometimes happens. So we really focus on opening up that space for kids to just learn and explore. And we use our local parks to do that, in our local state parks and our local city parks to do that. And then also a big part of our mission is pay what you can. We understand that, as many of you guys do, that access to the outdoors, whether it's transportation, whether it's financial, that a lot of kids just don't have that access. So we run a pay-as-you-can system, which means, like on this extreme case, we have a $1,500 trip for 14 days backpacking. And all a kid and his parent could afford is $50. That's what they pay. And our donors and grants come through and just cover the rest of that. So to remove that barrier, we focus a lot on our marginalized communities out there, especially we are right on the Puyallup tribal land where our organization is. And so we have the opportunity to work with a lot of youth from that community and provide that access to their land as well. So we offer a variety of programming. We offer programs for ages 7 to 11 as well. Those kids, we run the programs quite the same for that age group as well. They get to go a little farther out, like snowshoeing out on Mount Rainier, which turns into, if you all are familiar with working with this age group, turns into about 20 minutes of snowshoeing, and 3 hours of snow tunnels, snowball fights, making slides, making jumps. It's a perfect experience. It's the same thing. They're just learning to explore and go at their pace and understand, learn what they appreciate about the outdoors. We have our backpacking, as it says above. This is our middle school and high school groups. They come out for 5 to 14 days. These trips, they immerse themselves in the Olympic National Park, North Cascades, and Rainier National Park. Same thing, we run an outdoor education focused trip where the goal isn't necessarily to get to camp, but we will get to camp. But it's shorter miles, but we focus a lot about like learning about who grew up on this land, who cultivated this land, what plants are growing out there, what are the rocks that are out there, what's the geology like, why are these trees growing next to this river, and subalpine firs are growing up higher elevations. So we try to focus on like learning the environment, learning the trails, learning how to backpack, learning how to read a map. We have a 14-day course that focuses on, hey, high schoolers, like, choose your route today. Let's go where you guys decide. And it's pretty incredible. We also work with the local high schools. We primarily work with Sandy High School, which is a school in the Scrum School District. We teach outdoor education there. And we also teach courses there on like how high schoolers can teach outdoor education to second graders. All Tacoma Public School second graders filter through the school and learn how to play and learn in the woods and on the sound. And then I've already talked a little bit about our scholarships. It is very focused on pay what you can. We have an easy process for parents to just email us and say, hey, this is all I can afford, and it's an honor system, and then we just reach out to our community. We'd love for community to pour into the community and make these trails accessible for you. We have a lot of single parents out there whose kids are coming out of COVID learning, who are just like, we need trails, we need time outside, we need disconnection time. We spent a lot of time on our screens, on our laptops, and our phones. We're lonely. So we focus a lot on that, especially with our middle school, high school, and our teaching and SAM. And then these are just a few slides of like some feedback we got this past summer from our kids. And this concludes. Happy to pass this on to someone else.
Thank you, Lorela. Yeah, so next up is Eric Miller from Pierce County Parks.
Well, good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's doing all right. Just give me a second here. I promise I would not land for more than 5 minutes on this section. So I'm just gonna set myself a little right here. Because anybody who knows me, I do that. So yeah, my name is Eric Miller. I am the recreation coordinator in the South Region for Pierce County Parks. I do just want to differentiate that because we do have, for Pierce County, we are a large space, so we actually break parts that are not in the region. So I'm specifically in the South Region where that kind of entails. We're really in the Bethel, Puyallup school district areas, just as a geographic reference. Frederickston, Graham, are really our primary service areas out that direction. And so really what I did is I really just kind of threw some pictures up there, right? Here's worth 1,000 words, I hope. Examples of the types of programming we're running and we're trying to do. So my background is really youth rec. I was a camp director for a long time, overnight, day camp, the whole bit. So I think when I'm looking at programming, I kind of come at it like a campy stuff, right? Like I'm used to having 300, 400, 500 kids outside and putting them in programming outdoors. And so one of the things we kind of started with was, and I know we're a little further ahead in the slides, but one of the first types of programming we're trying to engage this community in programming. Was we kind of kicked off our Earth Day celebration. So we took Earth Day as like a, hey, everybody knows what Earth Day is. Let's make a thing out of it. So our first real kickoff to nature-based programming in Pierce County as a more holistic approach was this Earth Day event. And we ended up with about 120, 130 people, which is not like huge or anything for an event that's a one-off first time. We thought that was all right. And we got people engaged, right? Whether there were people who knew about the program through marketing, whether it was people who were in the park and just saw something going on. It got a lot of attention, which was really cool. So we kind of got the word out that we're doing things through a big event like that. And then what we're doing now is trying to move that into more regular programming, right? Whether they're one-off programs, whether they're continuing programs. The focus is really to try to build this program. And I'll throw one thing out there just kind of real quick. One of the roadblocks, quite honestly, that we're experiencing right now is that we took this initiative in Pierce County because based on our approach to plan responses in the last round, the community was telling us they wanted outdoor nature programming. What I think we're discovering right now is that that means a lot of things, a lot of different things to a lot of people. And so one of the first things we tried was sort of this direct nature-based programming, right? So we're creating programs that aren't about being out in nature. And honestly, what we found is those are kind of getting some poor response. So the tack we're kind of looking at taking next is more maybe something that I'm a little more used to, but taking that camp approach to it and saying, great, we just started a program called Little Adventures in September, and it's geared towards 45 minutes, it's preschool age kids, and it's just, you flip a couple, it's time outside, but also time inside, just kind of play with it. And what we're doing is, that's the program. My piece of the program is the first part of it, we're spending 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes kind of with magnifying glasses, we've got observation, we've got markers, and we're going around and doing basic nature science with that. And then from there, right, you kind of engage them in the other part where they get to play on the slide and all that good stuff, and that's fun. But we're building excitement around nature being a part of our general programming. And that's what we're really moving towards. The other thing I'm really excited about, again, as a camp person, I'll try to do this quick, it's got about a minute left, is that this was our first summer of, we call it Deep Rooted State Camp. And that is, the focus is really, it's a feature-based day camp. We want you to come and be outside, we want you to learn new things. And actually, so Pierce County, so I'm personally big on partnering across the board. I love partnering, connections, all that, because I'm fully aware that I can't do this all on my own. I've got a ton to serve, a ton to do, can't do it. So we actually roped in Lorelei over here as a Holly this summer to start kind of helping us work on our Deep Root State Camp program. We were also partnering with, and unfortunately couldn't be here this morning, to Tahoma Audubon. As they're kind of going through rejiggering of their own. We're working with them too to kind of put this idea of nature-based programming in Pierce County, in parks. You're coming and you're doing an activity, a variety, right? It can be on a bunch of things to try to keep the context fresh. Sorry to kind of ramble on, but getting all these partners in to kind of accomplish that goal is something we're working on. So, we've got more questions coming up. I hope we'll be able to answer. Hopefully we'll be able to answer some more stuff in the question section. That's my kind of basic.
Thank you, thanks, Eric, appreciate it. And next up is actually David Dunphy, right here next to me, from Youth Experiential Training Institute, or YETI.
Awesome, thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is David. I'm the executive director at YETI, which is a fancy term for wearing a lot of hats in our 5-person staff team. YETI believes that all young people should access outdoor adventure and time in nature. We were started by a group of parents in the Highline School District about a decade ago that really wanted to see more opportunities for the young people down there. And we continue to center our work in South King County because we know that many young people are furthest from that time in nature and access to adventure. The big kind of differentiator I think about in YETI is how we focus on the academic school year and focus in the public school. So we have community partnerships with the Highline School District and the Peckville School District, which allows our programs to run in the schools. The other big piece I think about is our program director is a rock climber and he hates friction in his system. So he's always talking about what's the friction that's going to stop a young person from trying something. So sometimes that means equipment. So we make sure that we have clothes and boots and have amazing partners like Evergreen Mountain Bike Alliance, that we have bikes and we have No Child Left Inside, and we have kayaks so that a young person can show up and they're not going to be othered for not having the equipment to be successful. Transportation is also a huge piece of our puzzle. So by going to the schools, we eliminate that because we know the young people start there. And we really activate things that are walkable from school, and that we don't do programs unless we can provide transportation. And sometimes that means the staff is waking up early and staying late because they're dropping kids off at home and doing that extra mile to make it happen. The other piece is food. Whenever we have programming, we make sure that there's food there. You never know where a young person's next meal is going to come from, so we want to make sure that if they're hanging out at the YETI Club, they know that there's going to be some pretty good snacks there. The other piece is that there are a lot of outdoor programs that focus on that summer time. And there's amazing adventures and things that we go to all kinds of really cool places in the state. But sometimes we don't think that integrates into a young person's life. They're being plucked out of the community and going and seeing the North Cascades or seeing the Olympics or doing these incredible things, but they might not know that park just around the corner. And that's what we really think that having these weekly outdoor clubs in these middle schools and high schools allows students to really discover that and create the joy in that space. So that's what we're up to at Yeti, and I'm really excited to keep talking with you all about your own program.
Thank you so much. And next up on our panel is Jason Miles from Miles High Club.
Good morning. How's everybody doing? Thank you. Let's try. Good morning. So, whenever they're moving miles, I am the founder CEO of the Miles High Club. It would be a travesty not to use my last name. Company that is opportunity, right? So, but what we're all about is we're really about unlocking the outdoors to the inner adventure of every person, so they get us. The outdoors is literally for everybody, and so right? And so our main thing is removing any barriers, if not all barriers as possible, so that everybody can get us, right? And so it's some of the other people here said, some of the barriers like transportation, food, knowledge, all that kind of good stuff, right? Now, how we got started in taking kids hiking is because I would talk with a lot of my friends up here, and a lot of them who grew up here never went outside. They didn't go hiking, they didn't see what was actually in their backyard. And I thought that was terrible. And so I thought, if we can actually start with youth and build that relationship between them and the outdoors at an early age, hopefully we can build and foster a beautiful relationship with them here. And so there's as of right now, there's a couple different programs that we're running. One of them is with Sanctuary Catholic School. And so twice a year for 4 months at a time, every single Friday, we'll take their kids away, right? And so, if you know anything about St. Louis Catholic School, which is right here in Seattle, 80% of them are free or reduced. Okay, so that right there is a lot of barriers that we actually, and thankfully shout out to our partners, sponsors like Lulu and Nike, GNREI, that really help step in and cover that gap. So that these kids are kind of come out of pocket for virtually anything when it comes to gear, clothing, there's a picture of there. You see all of them go back one. What? There we go. Or even one more. I think there's another picture. You'll see all of them right there down the same year, right? And this now one thing that I had to learn the hard way is that I created an entire lesson plan for what we were going to do. And none of it mattered every single time I went outside. None of it, right? And so what we ended up doing was really teaching them some basics, right? So instead of saying, okay, let's learn 7 different trees, we probably only learned 2 and we let them climb on some of the others, right? Or like, okay, we start teaching how to read math, start teaching about how to etiquette. Of course, the great that you brought up here about like snacks and stuff like that. I started learning that kids get really cranky if they don't eat. It was a lot of learning that we went through as well, but we were fully prepared and ready to handle everything. Now, if you keep going, there's another organization I work with called ACE Academy, and they're after school and summer program for youth as well. And so that's a little bit older and a lot more, right? So about 45 to 60 kids in that program. And so what we can do with them is we'll get taking them a little bit further out. With the younger kids, we don't want them to call that one. Our main thing is we want you to be out of the fun learning because we really want you to be outdoors. And so there's a lot of local parks that we want you to go into because again, building that initial relationship. And then once you get a little bit older, then we'll go a little bit further out. Then we'll actually do some real hiking, right? Because they can handle it. And then at that point, the ask becomes a little bit more, right? And now we're creating real experiences. Now we have a lot more food. Now we have more people on staff that we need some staff around all of these things, right? And so here, you see, we partnered with Wallace Falls. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Wallace Falls, and the park rangers, they were absolutely phenomenal. They were also able to help them some programming for us. One time gave them a call, let them know they're going. So these are some of the things that we're doing with myself.
Thank you so much. Even as an environmental educator by trade, it still is amazing to me to hear about all the different elements it takes to get kids and people outdoors. So excited to throw some more questions at the panel. And so these questions everyone can answer, but you don't have to answer. We heard a little bit about the different programs that you're running, and we also heard about like green spaces or public lands or waters. that range from like local parks to national parks like Mount Rainier. So if you could just drill down on those spaces that you're using, like what are the regular parks that you're going to for your programs, and how are you choosing them? What are the important components that you're looking for in a park or public lands that you're taking kids or communities to?
I mean, I guess I'm a little spoiled being here county parks, right? Like I've got it kind of built in. But kind of like I was talking before, right? It's about service area, right? It's about where our community is. So we do run a lot, or not a lot. We are trying to aim to run a lot because it's a new program for us. Out of Frontier Park in Graham, because that is sort of a hub for the school district. They actually run the cross country meets out of there. So it's kind of a hub space for them. So when we're looking at that, you know, that's a clear cut one. We spread them out between a couple different parks because we break the different communities. So we're running programs out in Frederickson because that community by Cross Park out there, while they're a couple blocks from the main road, they're actually kind of set back. And they don't have, you know, we're talking about access to transportation. They don't have that access to like, great, like I can go up there and walk down the road, get a bus, and there's a park. Like, I'm not just talking kids, I'm talking anybody. So they're all set at the back. So having a park in that neighborhood, we've actually found it's really important to that community, whether it's just coming to the park, playground, or whether it's coming back to use the Notches Trail Reserve back there. Being intentional about putting programming to serve different communities is really kind of how we determine it, right? It needs nasty in order to have it.
So for us, especially the younger kids, like the 4 to 6, and 7 to 11 age groups, we focus a lot on our very local parks. We use Point Defiance in Tacoma. We use Dash Point State Park in Federal Way. We use those primarily because there is access to those parks, especially for the communities we're working with. Federal Way has this kind of like lower economic community that comes out to our kids out there, so it makes it an easy access right into the park from that area. And then Point Defiance Park, it's kind of the same thing. There's a lot of access, you know, buses that come out that way. And it's just a big park. And those two specific areas we run a lot of trips through. One, we have a partnership with Sammy High School and Point Defiance Zoo, so we have like a lot of access there. We can work with a lot of staff in setting things up. But also both of those parks really offer, they're big enough to offer exploration everywhere. So we're not confined to like smaller trails. Not that we wouldn't be opposed to that, but like this really allows us to, especially like Point Defiance Park, we can spend a lot of time on trail and then venture off trail like deep into the woods. And then we have access back down to like Owens Beach, so we can be on the waterfront and see like the seals coming in. And so we have this variety of different space to work with, and then the space to just explore and not be like in a trail runner's space or the puppies that are being walked. And the kids can just explore, and it's such a, both of those areas are maintained so well that like the kids have the opportunity to like climb on the fallen logs and learn about the, like Point Defiance Park has like the rose garden and different gardens like that. So just there's a variety that both of those parks have been put together for that makes access to learning and exploring right off of the trails very easy for these smaller age groups. So that's our local parks. Do you want me to drill down into like what we use national parks or anything?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So we use trail systems in all 3 of our national parks. We keep our miles pretty small. I think the most the high schoolers walk is like 6 miles, maybe, with 1,000 gain. We keep it pretty small. And we like to partner with the national parks because for one, they really have created a welcoming space and an easy, I guess, paperwork access right into the park. Also, we've been able to work with different park rangers to come and talk to the youth and educate them on different things that are happening in the park, like whether it's the ecology of the park or reasons the park became the park, or the access issues that have happened over the years with different communities not being allowed to park. And that really caters to a lot of the youth that come on our trips. And then also, for our youth, just being able to explore those parks that are a little bit further from where they live, just that they're there and there's like easier trails to do and they're capable of accessing these trails, like being on the trail and like capable of like hiking this many miles to camp. So that's why we focus more on our national parks.
Sounds good. Well, feel free to, am I going to the next question too fast? I'm good.
I'll speak on that a little bit. Yeah, so a couple of things from a programming standpoint that are helpful in green spaces. One is connectivity, like the more that we can leave the school campus and human power to the park, whether it's safe walking trails or bike trails, is pretty critical. That helps control costs of delivery of the program and also invites a young person to go back to those spaces. Kind of moving further out of that, like having parking and bathroom spaces available are like critical for immediate programming. I think you can lose a lot of your time searching for that bathroom. The other piece for our program is like we really allow the young people to drive the activities that we do. Whether it's like we want to go hiking or geocaching or biking, or we want to bring those stoves and have that in the park. And I don't know if you remember high school, but like a week is a long time for a high schooler, right? So like we are constantly on our toes about what are they going to want to do next week or even today. And permitting systems often limit that creativity of young people. So we find that land managers that really extend that flexibility of like the Yeti group's going to show up and they don't know what they're going to do until they're there. Really helps us allow for the young people to claim their public land to use it the way that they want to.
Thank you, and you all have touched on this a little bit already, but if we could talk about any barriers that you encounter when setting up these programs. We've heard parking. So specifics about that and anything else that makes it difficult to get your communities outside.
So, you're exactly right, we did touch on a lot of barriers already, right, like, finances, years, transportation, food, all that kind of stuff. Another barrier though is interest. Is the outdoor, does it have enough social capital for the kids to want to go, right? And that's one of the barriers that I'm finding right now. It's like, who's the one with the most social capital that can convince their friends that this is something that they should all do, right? So that's one of the barriers that I don't think we spend enough time thinking about or talking about, right? Like, of course you're gonna have, and look, we can be honest, sometimes parents don't even see the value, right? Or see how important the benefits of, right? So I think outside of the basic barriers that we can all understand and agree to, I think that's the next, right? It's like, is this something that people can have interest in? And then how do you then get them to see the value of it before they actually go outside? And then how do you make it quote unquote cool enough so that they want to keep coming back?
And you can go first that time. Yeah, I just think where, so I totally agree with you. Same thing, it ties into kind of what I was talking about before, is that really being able to kind of drill down on what, outdoor nature-based programming means to the community you're serving. It's something, like I said, like openly, like I think I'm struggling with right now, right? I think my idea of what nature-based programming for a community is not necessarily aligning with what our community is saying they're looking for. So I think going back down and really having these conversations, right, like intentionally, like I'll be honest, like sometimes, when I see a big group in a park, like I'll just wander around the park and talk to people because I want to know what they're looking for, right? Like as a county, employee, as a county service, right? Like I truly feel like it's my job and my obligation to find out what my community is looking for and then provide that. So right, what I'm hitting on isn't it, like stinks for me, but that's part of being a programmer, right? Like you program things sometimes you think are gonna be great and make it just fun. We've all been there. So I think just really being willing to kind of like take that time, to talk to your community, talk to your people, is helping a little bit with that barrier, but that's truly, a big barrier, kind of what your point is, right? Like, that's social capital, like, right, like, who am I gonna talk to in the park? It's gonna be that connector that's gonna get, whether it's the homeschool group or the friend group or, the adult group, right? 'Cause we look at, outdoor nature-based programming, not just for youth, but we look at this, truly, pipeline kind of thing, right? We wanna serve and get you engaged as a preschooler and keep you engaged, through you being an active older adult, right? Like, that's what we're going for. The outdoors is such a great space for a lifetime activity, and we wanna provide those activities, and I just think getting over that barrier of figuring out what these individual groups, whether they be preschool families or elementary school families or school districts or homeschool or whatever. Just figuring out what outdoor nature-based programming means to them. And just sort of like hitting a wall and being willing to break through that wall and try something else.
Yeah, I'll agree with what you said as well, like, sometimes that definitely is the case, we're running a caving trip. In the next couple of weeks, and we were just getting no traction, and then one parent reached out. And we were like, well, we can't run this trip unless we have X amount of clients, and they're like, I will tell all my friends. And we're like, oh, I wanted you to tell all your friends for a long time, I want all the parents to tell all their friends, but it's how to reach, and I would say one of our biggest barriers is just that marketing out there, like really getting a reach. And to like I meet parents all the time, they're like, oh, I wish I had heard about your program sooner. And so it's finding that reach, and sometimes there's barriers to that, like, for example, if any of you do like digital promotions within the school system, there's a fairly hefty cost. Especially for a nonprofit to be able to drop that much thousands of dollars to reach like all of these schools. For, let's say, just running one program. So if you're running like multiple programs and multiple events, like that can really, really add up. So somehow finding that, like, how to reach the parents versus like that marketing money. There's just a barrier in there because parents do want to know.
Yeah,
Sorry, I think that actually, you kind of hit on something that we're working through too, right? That social media piece, that marketing, right? Like I was talking to somebody yesterday that was talking about how their organization has limits of what or where they can post things on social media. We actually got into a really good discussion because I think some of us are struggling with, right? Our organizations are really marketing through like a specific social media, for example, like Facebook. And like the conversation yesterday was totally right. Was like actually like the kids and the teens and the youth we're trying to reach, look at Facebook at all. So like if we're marketing youth programs, how do we do that? I think it's a great conversation with some people within our organization to go, hey, we're a little bit antiquated at this point. Like we need to kind of move things along and figure out how to do this right. And that's definitely another boundary we're kind of struggling with too, to kind of cause that market youth programming to the parents, which doesn't always really work well because right, my kid getting something by my parent, kind of less likely to want to do their job at it versus like I saw it myself and I think it's really cool. So I'm gonna go do it. So just that sort of social media marketing barrier with organizations sometimes, putting limits to what you can do and where you can go and not necessarily be in those official places to do that posting and go.
David, any barriers you want to speak to?
Yeah, we talked.
Friction?
Yeah. We talked about like permitting, we talked about bathrooms. I think the other thing that land managers and like partners can help with is really that like welcoming and making spaces feel welcoming to young people. I think a lot of times in our local parks, you have some of the highest user conflict just because we don't have a traditional kind of use case, like here's now 15 children instead of the like one person walking their dog, and you might be using the park in a different way. So I think that that's helpful to have allies and communicating that to neighbors and other people that sometimes traditionally gatekeep some of those local parks, that they're going to see young people in there in a different space in a different way, and front loading that I think is helpful.
And I hear all of you talking a lot about like the individual experience that each person wants, figuring out what that is and making that happen. And that's such a powerful thing, so I appreciate the work that all of you are doing. And that leads me to my next question, which is to hear about the impacts that you see of your programs, whether that's individual stories, whether that's anything you want to share about how it's affecting the communities you work with.
So, there's always a little bit of hesitation or apprehension when the kids first get out there, right? But to see their eyes light up with things like, for example, when they finally feel that we come back, right? So let's tell a story. We would take them to the food gardens. And right when you walk in, right at the trailhead of that area, there's maps, right? So I would give the maps, I would have them get into pairs, and I'll say, hey, cool, lead me to the red bridge. Now, it took us 3 times, 3 different days until we finally got it. But once we got to that red bridge, they didn't want to leave, right? They're like, oh my gosh, we finally did it. So things like that, when you see the things click, where they're like, oh my gosh, I know which way is north, right? Or like, oh my gosh, I know how to identify that tree, or like whatever, those are the really big wins. Or even then hearing the testimonies from them here, it's like, oh my gosh, your movie, my son doesn't stop talking about you. He's never been as excited to go to school, right? It's those different types of things that it's like, okay, this is why we're doing what we're doing. And now, granted, you may never hear those affirmations from the kids themselves because it's cool, but to hear it outside of them or hear from third party, so it always makes it.
For us, a lot of impacts we have, especially with our younger kids, that are 4 to 6 year olds. We see the impact of the parents come and they just start crying and throwing fits because it's time to go. So it's always like a real pleasure to us, like, I'm sorry you're feeling this way, but we'll see you next week, right? Right? Outside of that, we've had a lot of parents email us back and they were like, my kid came home so dirty and so wet. I have to buy waders now. Thank you, they had like the best time just throwing mud pies at each other. They learned some things, but yeah, they do come back a little bit dirty, but we also, especially with our middle school, high school kids, we ask them to fill out a pre-trip survey when they start their trip. So it will kind of go down the list of like, have you backpacked before? Are you nervous about anything? What are some of your fears? What do you want to learn? What are you excited about? And so we kind of go through the gamut so that we understand who we're taking out on this trip and like what they're thinking about, what they're excited about, what their fears are. And then they do a post-trip survey at the end. And it's incredible to see that impact change in kids of like, I really love that I learned all about this one tree. I know how to identify this one tree now. I can tell everybody what a Douglas fir is. Or like, I didn't think I could poop in the woods. His kids will tell us they're gonna hold it for 5 days. And we challenge them. Yeah. But also like we get these surveys back that are like, I didn't even think I was capable to leave home for 5 days or to not have my phone for 5 days. And so we are seeing the impact from these surveys and it's really inspiring to us. We know that we're doing the mission that we set out to do. And they're not necessarily coming back like this is the greatest backpacking experience of my life because they're, you know, a lot of them are like, you know, it just comes down to like, yeah, I got to learn these things. My guy taught me all about antlers, because we keep a biologist on staff. So we're seeing that impact and we really like it. We get some interesting critiques back too, like, stop feeding us couscous. We're not old enough for that. So we get all sorts of impact stories and we learned from that couscous is not on the 2024 menu. Maybe just for the guys. Yeah, the impact has been great, especially because we know the communities we're reaching out to who wouldn't normally have this access. So we love hearing like their feedback from these trips.
Yeah, I can think of so many stories. I think we all can. Yeah, so like three quick ones. One, we started a program at Pacific Middle School last year, weekly club. And I remember the first field trip that those students did was to Dash Point State Park. And this park is, a beautiful state park that's 7 minutes from school. And only 2 of the students had ever been to that park, 7 minutes. So finding these places that are reputable, that are their public lands that are so close, and they just need to get invited into those spaces. Another one that comes to mind is we do a lot of biking at North Cat Park, and that park was going to be turned into some parking that was saved by a group of community members. And it's a phenomenal place to learn biking, and it's so close to these students. So there's pocket parks that need advocacy so that they can be activated. One of the programs we run there is with Partners in Employment, which is a youth program for recent immigrants that are being paid to do conservation work, and we meet up with them once a month just to go ride the trails and have fun in the places that they're conserving. So seeing that whole connection of caring for the land, but also playing in the land, I think is also really impactful. And then the last story I can think of, we spent a lot of time at Seahurst Park, which is a beautiful park. And I remember Zineb, who's now a freshman in high school, she was in middle school at the time, coming back after a program and saying, like, I brought my mom back to that park. And that joy of her getting to share something with her family is so cool. So I think that those are moments that just stick with you about how once you invite a young person to these places, like it is theirs. They'll help take care of it. They'll help bring more people to it.
Yeah, I think, right, just, not to pat too hard what everybody else is saying, but yeah, smiles, right? Like, I think, there were some of the pictures that I put up, initially because it's just an example of the kind of joy the programs bring, if that makes sense, right? Like, you see the kid playing with oobleck and like smiling and you can't control it, like, it's a science experiment. He doesn't know what a non-Newtonian fluid is, but he's sitting there playing with oobleck and like learning how it operates, how it functions, and how to make it and all that. So I think it's a smile. I think the other piece for me, something maybe a little bit more quantitative, is the kids or the campers or the participants that carry over into multiple programs. So, right, so a measure of success for me was even just yesterday, we had one of our deeper day campers attending a different program, attending a different nature-based program. So she was part of our little adventurers program, and see Parker come in and just be like, great, I recognize you and I know what I'm doing and I'm super engaged and I'm super excited to grab my magnifying glass again. And I know what doing observations are, so we're gonna go around, we're gonna do our observation, we're gonna draw the sheet, and I understand what we're doing. And you realize it's like they're coming back, they've grasped the concept, and they're coming back to get more of the concept. That to me is a strong quantitative measure of success for me, right? It's the kids that are embracing the concepts and the programs that we're doing and continuing to the point that we're signing up for more because we like what we're doing. So I always kind of look at those numbers as a gauge to kind of just see, like, are we being successful, right? And on top of the feedback and on top of, constantly, almost hesitate to use the word badger, but it is what it is. Contacting parents to get that feedback, to ask them every email, like, hey, like, how can we do better? Like, hope your experience was great. Basic stuff like that, but really looking at the quantitative too, as far as who's carrying over and participating in different programs along the same lines.
David touched on something that I'm curious about. I'm going a little off script, so feel free to not answer. But I'm curious if you have heard of anything where the folks who are engaged in your programs then return to a park you took them to, or return to an activity that you did together. It may or may not be, knowledge that you have access to, but that was a cool story. I don't know if anyone else has something similar.
I mean, probably a little bit different, right? Because we've got the kind of stationary parks kind of assigned to. Yeah, seeing these kids from campus in the program coming back out to the parks and engaging with the parks and dragging their parents out to the nature classroom to show them what they've been working on or doing in the nature classroom, or taking them down to hiking trail down there to kind of just, hey, this is what we did. We go down here, it's our little wetlands area, this is one of our pools. That I think that counts, I can't know, like it's so nice to see them coming back and using it in the way that. Not that we taught, but the way that we sort of engage.
Yeah, for us, we took a group of 8-year-olds nurturing last year at Mount Rainier. And one of the parents just sent us an email, like 2 weeks later, they went back as a family. And went snowshoeing and then sent us some photos. And then outside of that, I had another example.
Well, let us know if it returns. Really cool to hear about the connections that you all are making. And the last part of our discussion is going to be about partnerships before we open it up to questions from all of you out there. So hopefully you have some burning questions. So you've definitely touched on this, but I'm curious, how do partnerships and collaboration make your programs happen? Or maybe is there, one example that you could give of a collaboration that was really successful?
So I touched on this in my intro, but, we have great relationships with REI and Keys, right? And so, one of the main ways that I really saw these organizations close together is when it came to COVID, right? So, we were entering the rainy season, which is like 8 months out here. And so the kids didn't have any proper rain gear or boots or hats or warmth that they needed, right? They had the stuff to get them by, but like when we're outside for 2-3 hours, the stuff you had to quickly realize it didn't done, right? And so REI closed the gap. They said, okay, what do you need? And they provided the hats, the gloves, the rain jackets, the inner layer. They gave every single kid. They give every single parent of that kid $100 gift cards, so they can go and get more of anything else they forgot about. They did give them shoes. And then they gave them a box for any more kid that wanted to come that may not be hiking with us that day, but still wanted something, right? So that was them going over and above and beyond what was expected or asked, right? Lululemon, what they did was they were like, okay, well, this is going to be the cost of transportation, we'll cover that. So we can make sure that everybody is able to go, right? So they just really, really beneficial and really appreciate them backing up what they said.
Yeah, I think I can echo a lot of those things. I think, resources like equipment is like a big place that partners lean in to make sure that that equipment library is set up for young people. I think that subject matter experts is another big piece. Like we have community partners that bring their knowledge on specific things. Like I can think of like Evergreen bringing like bike instructors to share staff time. I can think of the WTA helping scale and share resources and those kinds of partnerships, just really open collaboration and sharing of resources in that way. And then I think the other big piece that a lot of our programs have in common is that pay what you can or making the programs free. And I think we really look to the outdoor community to say, hey, if we want these things, then we have to make the grant funding, make the partnerships possible to allow to tell a young person, no, look, you're welcome here, like don't worry about that.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. We've had Alpha Research reach out to us and help us out with the clothing in the gear closet. And then partnering with WTA and their gear closet, especially when we were first standing up, we relied on them quite heavily. And that was a great partnership as well. Just the transaction between making everything work was just incredible. And outside of that, working for us, I've been able to work within, like, navigate my way through like the Tacoma public school system. Just kind of build partnerships there. Like I talked about Sandy High School, that's housed right inside Point Defiance Zoo. Within the scope of that, like just the way that their school structure is set up, we've been able to they've sent us interns to kind of help out with like some of the help we need, and it's a growth opportunity for high school students, and it just kind of builds our program and just kind of like helps out with that branding, so other kids are kind of talking about, hey, like there's opportunities here to kind of work with this nonprofit and learn some things. And then just like that connection piece, so for us.
Here's now is really about the programming, I guess, and the knowledge base as far as the partnerships go. I will figure out how to get some gear, outdoor research early out your day. That would be super awesome. I think, you know, what we've done so far is really lead on partners for program support and also reach, right? Like, my fancy piece of paper says one thing, like it says on your, it's great. Like, I'm not an expert in everything. So if I'm gonna run a program that I need somebody who's got more knowledge or some expertise that I don't have, right? Like bringing those partners in. That partnership also helps with general reach, right? So like the more people that I can bring in, right? We're marketing on our end, but then they also end up marketing on their end, and they're reaching out to their people. And going through their avenues, engaging different people, different groups, different organizations, different whatever. And I think it becomes simple, not the right word, it becomes a two-way street, right? So I'm asking program partners or organizations to help support just time, right? I understand time is money, you have to go out and stuff like that, but you know, I think it's really just about being willing to provide exposure for them coming out and then having that person who we know is that genuine knowledge base. So we're also connecting our families to the appropriate research. I think that's a piece of it too, right? Like, Pierce County is a fairly large reach, but if we've got a resource that's the best fit, we want to be able to give you that resource. I think that partnership piece is really important, that kind of expanding our ability to provide resources to our community. So, you know, while we're not getting the gear and stuff, I think those partnerships are incredibly important to us as far as the types of programming we can offer and the reach that we have.
And still thinking about partnerships, my final question for you all, and then we'll open it up to everyone here is, do you have any hopes for extending partnerships in the future? And what would those hopes be? I'm seeing some nods, some photographs, yes.
Yeah. Is that the right answer? That feels like the right answer. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really, again, like maybe it's being a camp person, maybe it's just a community that we're all in, but like partnership is so key to everything. I believe, I guess is the way to put that, right? Like I truly, genuinely at my core believe that like, as much as I like to think I know I don't know it all. So like, it's bringing again, like not to circle back and parent myself, but it's bringing those people in. It's expanding that reach, it's doing more with them, finding different parks to go to, doing different activities with them, you know, it's that expansion, right? I have this great dream of expanding partnerships that we're running camps for preschool age all the way to like 17. Like that, love to do that, but again, like, I'm just one person, I can't do that by myself. So I think it's really, really important to get into rooms like this with people who generally have the same sort of views that I have, or we have, or the same want to move in the same direction that we're trying to move in, and build those bridges and build those partnerships to expand what we can provide to our communities. Hopefully that wasn't too like sidetrack tangential randomly.
I echo everything you said. Everything. And everybody in the room was so, I'm very open to everything, very open.
Cars and everything.
Same. Well, I think like, I mean, I'm sure everybody here feels the same way, but like our goal is to reach you. And right, we only have so much reach and so many hours in a day. Although I am trying to spend 10 more hours a day in my role. But like we only have so much reach. And so like, right, partnering with other organizations, you're bringing a wealth of your knowledge, your type of organization, your type of reach, your spin on it, and just reaching more youth. We want to reach more youth and just keep providing like these outdoor spaces and welcoming youth into our outdoor spaces. So partnering brings that, and it brings change, and it brings like new ways to see things. And so yeah, I'm sure we all just welcome that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that was said there. I think the piece I would add is capacity building in other organizations to provide that. I think that all of us could probably talk about the limitations of staff or spots in the van and those kinds of things, but I think that as a community, we can be yeah, really imaginative about where and how we can provide more opportunities in more ways. Sometimes it's working with schools, sometimes it's families, sometimes it's that the park was designed in a way that the new user feels welcome in those spaces. And I think those are all points of success in our opportunities for bridges for people accessing.
I warned everybody at the beginning that I could talk a lot, right? So I just wanted to throw one more thing out there. It's kind of my fault. I didn't put it actually on our thing. I forgot. So I'll own that and just throw this out there. One of the things that I also kind of wanted to mention, and kind of aligns with partnerships, is this idea behind active versus passive programming. So like right, we know in parks that no matter how much programming I want to put out there are going to be more people in the parks that are just doing their own thing than programs that are going to run for them. So one of the things that we're doing is being very intentional, whether it's through partnerships, or collaborations, or things that we're doing, to provide opportunities for families who are just using the park in general, right? Any time of day that it's open, an opportunity to access some level of nature-based programming. So one kind of shout out that I want to do, I don't know if anybody here is familiar or uses the Agents of Discovery app. Anybody? Yeah, there we go, there's one. I love this app. I think sometimes it doesn't come across so I love the app, but I really love the app. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's basically the best way to describe it is Pokemon Go for nature. That has been so big for us because it allows us to set up challenges along our trail that we don't have to be present for, right? You have your phone, which the reality of the situation today is like 95% of the time, no matter whether you're on a trail or not, you're probably gonna have your phone with you. So if you're downloading the app, you're downloading the mission, like, let's go. And it gives you something to do without being, without having an active staff member to run a program. It gives you challenges to do. They actually just threw up a whole, they acted AR challenges, so augmented reality, so you can like pick things out of the air and throw it into a bucket. It's really cool and it's super customizable. You can do it and set it up for any way you want. So I apologize, this is really a plug to sellers for Discovery. I just wanted to kind of maybe mention that like there is this really big concept of passive versus active, and we've been focusing a lot on the active programming. Passive programming is a huge piece. Aside from Agents of Discovery, one of the things that we're really looking to do and have really in the process here is focusing on things like signage packages. So like when we built this trail in the back of one of our parks, we wanted to create this nature classroom. And just again, I know he's sitting in the back of the room, so young Ben Monticello hanging in the back there had a huge hand in planning, creating, building, doing the nature classroom and the trail back there. So just thank you, Ben. Thank you to your Washington Conservation Board crew and the entire crew. It's been great. So just felt like I just wanted to give a huge shout out to the big, but right, like having that trail, it's great to have a trail system there, but right, if I'm in a family and I'm down the trail and I'm just sort of programming the trail, it sometimes becomes a little meaningless, right? When you walk the trail, just walk through the trail and say you did it. When we were creating a signage package for this trail, we were super intentional about having things and having the signage not be something specific like this is a tree or this is a that. It asks questions, it prompts. It's not a specific activity, it's a trail of thought. There are QR code stickers that will be able to be changed out on these things. So if you do have your cell phone, you can scan the QR code and it'll send you to a website to provide you with more information about the trail, challenges, programs, or activities. But we want to engage people, we want to have ways for our community to engage in our trails and our parks, even when we're not there running programs. So I just wanted to thank you for giving me a little bit to ramble out on that. I just wanted to make mention that it's a huge focus for us. And it's something that again we're amazingly intentional about. So just wanted to put that idea out there.
Thanks, Eric, and to all of our panelists. At this point, we do want to open it up to questions from the audience, so I'm gonna come out, raise your hand if you have a question for any of our panelists in particular, or the panel as a whole. I'm sure there's something that sparked your curiosity. Thank you for being the first one.
In terms of creating interest or social capital, do any of your programs draw on older youth to engage with younger youth?
Yeah, I think that's like really the magic in youth programs, is when you have that full cycle. I think a lot of our high school programs, like those students do get those opportunities. Some of the school districts we work in have like a great camp experience that have those kinds of like virtuous cycles of engaging older students. One of the pieces I think is real for a lot of the young people as they get older is that there's obligations for helping with sibling care and the need to have financial contributions to the family. So we find that like other programs adjacent to us are like really leading into those things and thinking about paid internships and other ways to honor young people's time when they start getting back in this space. So it's really interesting trying to reach in our community.
For us, especially for our summer programming, where we're running the backpacking trips, almost exclusively, we run a 14-day wilderness leadership course for high schoolers. When they complete the course, they can come back and be like junior guides to our other 5-day courses for middle school and high school kids. And then they get a stipend along the way. So they're getting all these leadership skills. And then they come back and actually utilize those on our future trips that happen during the summer. So that's a big deal. And then a lot of them are just, they can keep coming back summer after summer. Also, we open up volunteerism for like when we run our smaller programs. We have a program we call Tiny Trails. We run it in Point Defiance and Dash Point State Park. And those are ages 4 to 6, and those are the kids that are running around exploring everything. And we invite their older siblings to come be on the trail with us. So they're like junior guides, and so they're with their siblings, which a lot of the time can really help out those parents because the parents are like, I'll be back in 4 hours. This is great. But we invite those older kids, those older siblings to come out and just be like junior guides, and they just really get involved with like all the kids that are there, and they're kind of like little leaders, although they don't realize it, and they're just like teaching about the cool thing they learned in science the other day, and it's just a great experience because they're giving back, and they don't necessarily realize it at the time, but like it's a great partnership they're developing, and we just more people on the trail and with their families, and it also creates like a very welcoming and comforting experience, especially for kids who are new to the trail, whether it's because they're young or it's just their first time in like that park, like having their older sibling with them and having older kids with them. It's a little comfort piece and like these 2 new adult guides that they've never had.
Yeah, I think for Pierce County, it's a not yet, but we need to. I'm pretty sure my team is sick of hearing me use the word pipeline, because that's, you know, like I said, not harping back on it, like coming from a professional camp background, like that's something that we really focus, and it's actually a measure of success. You know, we talk about it in camp, when we talk about, you know, the less outside staff you have, the higher, because you grow that internal base. The better off you are, and it really comes from doing that. It comes from you have your older campers, your older groups who go on through the program and generate excitement with that. And so much excitement, they don't want to leave, they want to continue to be part of the program. And then they become your best advocates for, you know, families or just starting off with kids who are nervous about camp. You know, I think one of my best tools when I was working in that was actually, you know, having the one you do it in places in general. I was having, you know, some of your most, you know, trusted counselors, you know, the ones that have been with you for a couple of years, one, and I think we'll use the advancement program. Because truly, right, like it helped me because I don't have to be, you know, in 18 different places at once. I've got my best people who are, you know, talk to families out there, and I trust we talk to staff out there and help you recruit staff, because right, the staff, my best staff who understand what the job is, and aren't going to give me somebody who can't do the job because it's a reflection of them. And all that really just to say that yeah, pipelines are insanely important, not just for program retention, but for staffing. They're probably your best staff as they move up through that point.
That's a great question. Other questions from anyone out here? Wonderful.
And let me know if we have questions from folks online. We do, okay, I will switch that up there. One of you had mentioned that after the program experience that they went home and they wanted to engage their parents and probably siblings to go out. How do you help reduce that barrier for when they do want to do that and the whole family then is here and they want to go snowshoeing? How do you then engage that and reduce the transportation, all the barriers that you already mentioned?
Well, for us, we make it very clear that like families are welcome to borrow from our gear closet, so. If their kid comes back from like a backpacking trip and it's like, hey, I wanna do this, we encourage parents to reach out, like. You can borrow gear from us, it's the same gear that the youth are using. So we offer that, outside of that, we predominantly answer, we're there to answer questions like, what trail are you looking at? Here's the permitting process. Like, here's the educational piece that sometimes can be a little bit difficult to like narrow down or find with the volume of information that's out there. So we're there to answer questions on access, get proper gear if they are gonna step out and like invest in their own gear, but otherwise we're there to offer up the gear. Transportation isn't something we necessarily can do. We transport on our trips, but unless we're running a specific program, like if the family's coming out and utilizing us, we can transport, but outside of that, we don't have transportation access, but most of the things we do.
I saw a question back here.
Thank you. Touching back on the theme of pipelines, I was wondering, for older youth, do you work with them on future planning, identifying opportunities for careers and natural resources or outdoor recreation, anything like that?
Yeah, I'm gonna answer that one just in the ideal, because I think right for Pierce County, just where I'm sitting currently, that's what we're trying to get to. We're not there yet. This program is still fledgling, it's brand new. We're still building this from the ground up. So as far as what we do currently, no, not yet. But to the point of pipeline, what I was saying before, yeah, that's absolutely a part of it. One of the things we have done to that end is we've had some different groups ask to come out and have me or us tour them around the park or nature classroom or talk about what I do or talk about what we do or what the goal is. And that's incredibly important. I think as you get into that older age, you're ready to go back to kind of some of the experience that I have had. So working in the camp world, we actually have this great program where through an organization, they granted us $2,000 or $3,000. But the $2,000 or $3,000 wasn't for us to spend, it was for us to work with our group of LIT, so the camp it's leaders of training, counselors of training, CIP, plus the other verbiage for it. But work with them and have constructive conversations on not just future planning, but like future thought, right? Like, where does this money go? How do you prepare for it? Is this something that you want to prepare for? Is it something you're passionate about? It helps kind of whittle down for them, right? Their passions, where they want to go. And on top of that, right, learning a little bit of like responsibility and learning that like, this is what's important. And this is why we're going to do it. I hope that helps answer some of it. If I went too sidetracked, we would react another one. But it really is, it's truly all a part of it. It's getting them ready for the next thing, whether it's through training, just that I knew it. For again, go back to the LIPCI, I think half the day of them too is, you have a little bit of your own programming, like you can't work, right? Like the other half of the day is going to actually put you in with your cabins, with kids who are learning. As you're doing this, one of the other things we were kind of doing, we kind of hit back on the internship piece that somebody mentioned. As far as older youth, younger counts, however you want to look at that retention. There's an internship for youth. So we had somebody who was running our sports head, who the rest of the year was actually like, we were lucky he was a kind of a header, top of the line marketing guy in New York. And so he could offer internships to staff who were looking to go down that field and we're willing to work hard to do a good job, right? And that was one of the ways we kind of retained that older group of kids. We said, hey, okay, that's the kids are coming back because they're leaving us for jobs. So do we have people in our pool, like we have a marketing person, do we have anybody who does law, do we have anybody who's a teacher? Offering basically internships in those fields to kind of retain those staff members, so they can put that down on resumes or on whatever. To help get them future jobs, and also, I apologize, I'm going super long on this one. Really being intentional about, especially with younger staff or older campers in this case. Having conversations with them about the skills that you actually picked up while working at this job. So I think, right, a lot of them are looking at like, oh, I'm camp counselor, like I didn't learn anything this summer, like I don't know anything, but at the same time. You look at it and go, actually, you're learning supervision, you're learning group direction, you're learning public speaking, you're learning program planning, you're learning organization, you're learning time management. Like all of these things come into play when you're the person in charge of a group of 12 kids. So devote yourself that way. Having those conversations is also incredibly important. So sorry for the long rambling answer. Hope that.
For our program, we have a wilderness leadership course, that's our 14-day course open to high schoolers. Within that, I mean, kind of like that realm of like future jobs, you would kind of look at us as like a guiding company, but like on the backpacking level of it. So when we work with those high school students, we focus a lot on like what credentials could you take away from this course that would set you up in the future if this is like a path you'd like to go. So each of those kids come out of that course with like their wilderness first responder. They'll come out with like other credentials like lead no trades, instructor. What else do we do with that? That might be it as far as like the major credentials that are kind of those stepping stones to get into the guiding world. Outside of like leadership skills.
Yeah, I think the two pieces I would add to that, that I've seen, one is, a culture around, staff and land managers and like trail working crews that, like, when we run into them and they share with the students about what they're up to and how that's their vocation, it's huge. I think we see the wheels start turning of like, oh my gosh, this could be a job. And I think the other one that we really appreciated is just the way to leverage technology. Like we've been able to have park rangers zoom into club meetings and other people from different land agencies giving their time that way. And I think that's really awesome. And it's been really great to find staff that are reflective of the students' lived experience that can join them. And I think that that's been pretty neat as well.
Thank you all, and I think this is the last question that we have time for. It's a question from someone online. Wondering if any of you do mountain biking with your communities? Because specifically, we're wondering, have you found affordable insurance for doing that activity?
Yeah, we do mountain biking. We, with some grants and partnership with Evergreen, have been able to have a student fleet of mountain bikes. And it was able to be covered under our normal insurance policies. And we had to lean on kind of our partners to help develop some of those things and articulate that to our insurance company, but that was possible. It's definitely, mountain biking, some of those activities are higher consequential. So I think that that's been big on communication with parents about what is the actual risk of your young person, like the likelihood of broken wrists and broken shoulders are higher than other activities that we do.
I mean, we don't do mountain biking, but I just kind of plug, right? Like we've been struggling with some of the insurance pieces too, to run new programs. There's different insurance requirements for the age and times that we live in, unfortunately. And I think it's gonna struggle sometimes kind of getting insurance for some of these programs, especially the outside vendor. So there is, we recently found, maybe there's still a little bit of hope if you look at this insurance piece. There's a specific vendor who I was familiar with just because they do a lot of work with camp programs, but they insure kind of more short-term day programs or week programs or that kind of thing. But they haven't applied to that because that's kind of go to the house, that short-term one-off youth programming. So happy to share that information, that would be helpful.
Sounds good. Well, I hope that this discussion has sparked some ideas for all of you for partnerships into the future. It sounds like there's 1,000 ways we could support these folks in the work that they are doing. And we are about to go on a 15-minute break and come back, 20-minute break, come back at 11:20 for our next session. So that's a great time to grab one of our panelists if you did have another question for them. And please join me in thanking each and every one of them for giving their time today.
Well, thank you, Lisa, and thanks to the organizers for putting this on. This is a really great opportunity to be here and talk about some of our work. I'm Ben Donatelli. I am a policy specialist with the Washington State Recreation and Conservation Office. And with me is
I'm Leah Doby, also policy specialist at Recreation and Conservation Office.
So we're going to talk to you about a couple of recent studies and publications that we've completed over the last couple of years. One of which is the State Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan. But before we get to that, Leah is going to talk a little bit about our equity review of grant programs that we did in 2020. But before we get there, just a little background about us as an agency for, in case you don't know who we are. The Washington State Recreation and Conservation Office is a very small but mighty little agency. We give out grants, we administer grant programs, we do studies and coordination of outdoor recreation planning for the state. And but our primary function is really around grant administration, grant management, and helping to facilitate all the good work that you all do across the state. So we have a variety of grant programs split up kind of into two halves of our agency. The Salmon Recovery Funding Board administers one half of that, and that's all work geared towards salmon habitat recovery, restoration, pulling out culverts and putting in bridges and doing stream side habitat restoration. The other half of our agency, which is what we're here to talk about, is the recreation and conservation side of the house. And there we have probably 10 to 12 grant programs. We administer roughly on that side of the house about 350 to 400 million biannually in all that is passed through in grant funds out to communities. We have three primary programs that focus on trails. The Washington Wildlife Recreation Program has a trails category. We administer the Recreation Trails Program, or RTP, which it comes to us from the federal government, federal highways, and then we have the NOVA program, our non-highway off-road vehicle activities program, which is state funded sort of counterpart to the recreation trail program. It focuses on backcountry trails, backcountry recreation, campgrounds, and all the sort of like facilities that support that work. So that's a little bit about us. I think with that, I will hand it over to Leah here to talk about our equity review.
Thanks, Ben. All right, so a couple of years ago, some of our staff were looking at our ranked list. So people apply for grants at the end, we evaluate them, and we end up with a list, ranking the projects. And they were noticing that we've got some people who every time they apply, they get a grant. And there are some other applicants that every time they apply, they don't get a grant. And then there are lots of communities that we don't hear from at all. And there are lots of different reasons for those things, but we started wondering if there were patterns beyond just our kind of glance and trends that we could analyze further. And if we could learn what some of the reasons were that we found those trends, what some of the reasons that were causing that. And if we could address some of those things to better serve our state as a whole. And so we started having a conversation about this with some of our stakeholders. And they were curious about it too. So they went and talked to some legislators, and that led to RCO receiving funding in the 2021 state budget to take a look at our recreation grant programs specifically. And to dive into an analysis of past granting, awards, of our policies, of our procedures, and then provide some recommendations. So. Can I have a mouse?
Yeah.
Thanks. So the legislature liked that idea too, and we got that funding, and these are some of the goals and outcomes that were identified by the legislature. So they wanted to take a look at our programs, and find opportunities to reduce barriers to underserved populations and communities' participation in our grant programs. Also, if through that process, they found inequities, figure out ways to address those. And to ultimately be able to more equitably distribute state funding around the state and in turn, better distribute the benefits of that funding as well. So that more communities around the state can get the physical, emotional, social, mental benefits of connection to the outdoors. So we received the funding and we worked with an organization called the Prevention Institute. We specifically wanted to contract this work out so we could get an outside view at it. And Prevention Institute used a number of different methods to approach this project. They applied what they call the dimensions of equity, looking at the kind of distributional side of things. How is green space distributed across the state? How are Recreation and Conservation Office funds distributed? Looking at RCO procedures, whether they are transparent, looking at whether they're easy to navigate or not, and if there are barriers that could be identified. And then also looking at RCO from a structural perspective as well, identifying any policies or norms that might be getting in the way of equity overall. That could include staff capacity to implement changes or lack thereof, and then having a goal also of reviewing how we are doing, where we're at, so that we can assess our change over time and make improvements. They also did a analysis of granting outcomes over 3 funding cycles. So they started this project in 21, and so they looked at 16, 18, and 2020 data, reviewing the ranked list and so much more. There was lots of data involved. Looking at who received funding and who didn't, what are the characteristics of those communities, comparing those across each other as well. And then reviewing too, RCO's granting procedures, how we go through our application process. There's a technical review period, evaluation, how each of those processes are set up to identify if there's any issues or barriers in that. They also applied and researched emerging practices that are being done elsewhere in the state and around the country regarding green space equity. And then we had a pretty robust stakeholder engagement portion as well that we contracted with a different entity based out of Seattle called the VITA agency, who conducted a couple rounds of community engagement, touching base with the same people on multiple occasions. People who are past grantees, people who are past applicants but were unsuccessful, people from that didn't know about us, ranging from jurisdictions or local governments to nonprofits, to try and get their qualitative feedback as well and not focus solely on the data. So after kind of getting information from all of these different places and applying their expertise, Prevention Institute came with us with a number of findings, and there are quite a few of them. So I just put a select few on here, but these are some of the big ones that they're all important, but to highlight a few. The first, they found that RCO funding is skewed toward places that have high amounts of green space to begin with. And they looked at kind of the amounts of green space at census tract level, and kind of divided it up. So that high category for them was areas or census tracts that had more than 8 acres per 1,000 residents. And so they found that we really are investing more in places that already have parks and green space. They also found that RCO is underinvested in communities of color, especially those in places that are in census tracts with low amounts of existing green space. And then with regards to income, they found some RCO programs serve low income areas well, while others don't. And so that's something for us to look at. The places where we tended to invest less were in low income areas that also had low levels of green space. We also found that though there were a number of things that we can do to improve our programs, that we also had low proposal activity from some types of communities. So we're not even getting applications from some of them, which could be many different things. They might not know about us, they might not want to be reaching out to us or applying for grant funds. They also might have like written themselves out of our programs. Some communities, we get feedback at the end of every grant round from both applicants and evaluators, and sometimes we hear, we've tried twice or 3 times and we didn't get it, and so we can't continue to put our staff time into this. We don't have a lot of staff, and then another is that our scoring scales are overly subjective. They found also a few of interest that are maybe not too surprising, that our processes are time consuming. Lots of grant processes are, and are quite burdensome. So they have recommended some opportunities to kind of ease that. Also noting a few other things like that we award grants on a reimbursement basis, like many different state and other entities. And that's challenging when you don't have cash on hand to be able to pay for things up front. You can't work with a reimbursement-based grant. And that's something that goes beyond kind of a challenge within RCO, but is still of note. So they got a lot of data, a lot of information, quantitative and qualitative, kind of put it into a group of findings, and PI came back to us with 6 high-level recommendations. And then under those high-level recommendations were 46 individual detailed recommendations. Not all of them play well together. So if you implemented all of them, you'd be like, well, this makes a problem over here. But they give us a lot to think about and a lot to move forward on. So next I'm going to review those 6 high-level recommendations and provide a few examples of things that were recommended that RCO could take on. And then later, after we talk about SCORP and the work that Ben has been up to for the last 2+ years, we'll talk more about implementation and what we're doing moving forward. So the first recommendation was to prioritize high-need areas. And if you've ever applied for an RCO grant, raise your hand if you have. Yeah, okay. If you ever applied for an RCO grant, you know that need is question we asked for. So you might say, well, don't we already prioritize high-need areas? But from this perspective, Prevention Institute is really looking at underserved high-need areas. How do we make sure that we can have a role in closing gaps to outdoor space and recreational access? A few ideas for that are to dedicate existing funds for some prioritizing specific communities, or creating a new outdoor equity program that we have dipped our toes into. If you if you get our newsletters and things like that, you may have seen our Planning for Recreation Access grant that went live last October, and we've got grants under contract now. That was funding that was allocated to RCO at the same time that the equity review funding was, for us to get money for comprehensive and site planning into communities that have recreational gaps that are in underserved areas, and to start to kind of help create a pipeline. So we don't consider that like a checkbox. That's the thing we got money to do at one point, and we're thinking about opportunities and what that means moving forward. But that's something that, as far as creating equity programs, we have, as I said, kind of dipped our toes in.
Although it's a note that that's not like the thing that checks the box. We need to look at our existing programs as well, not kind of other what an equity program might be. Let's see, and then we'll move on to the next one, which was to modify scoring criteria to address inequities. And a few of the recommendations in the review for this were to update the project need criteria to include objective measures, to include best management practices when you're looking at access and proximity. And then a few that I know I've heard people talk about are assessing where population proximity points creates disadvantage in certain places. And then another one that's specific to the Washington Recreation and Conservation Program, or I always say it wrong, it's only gonna be our beach trails category. They recommended to eliminate points for scenic value as well. And so some of these also, I'll note, are gonna be would be harder than others. Both the population proximity and scenic value are in statute. And so that doesn't mean that that's like totally off the table, but it just means that there's a different level of lift and risk associated with those. We'll talk more also about scoring criteria when we talk about implementation. The next one is support equitable proposal development and review. So this is really looking at our processes. And one of the recommendations here, which we have already done, was to make remote presentations a permanent option. So applicants used to have to drive to Olympia for a 15-minute presentation from everywhere in the state. And you know, since the pandemic, we've been doing remote presentations and it's been going very well. So that's a permanent option. Another recommendation was to provide more feedback from applicants. That's something we heard a lot during the engagement part of the process, was that sometimes people come with a proposal and they're not quite sure why it didn't stack up very well. And we have some work to figure out how we would accomplish that. Also increasing representation on evaluation panels and making sure that the people who are evaluating proposals are representing as broad a range as we can of individuals and communities across the state. The next recommendation was to build applicant capacity. And some of the ideas here include building a technical assistance program, whether that's in RCO or contracting with others, so that we have assistance that is available for applicants that don't have as much human power behind their desks, perhaps. Or helping to create like a peer-to-peer system where, say, you're a successful applicant and there's somebody who's new and hasn't ever been involved and has questions, and they can call us, our grant managers, like Jesse, get lots of questions, and we try to have a very open door, policy with them. But also, it's totally different to talk to somebody who's been an applicant and been the one presenting a number of times. And then trying to figure out if there are other ways that we can provide information to applicants. We have lots of information on our website and there's extensive manuals for every program, but maybe there's another way that can help get the key information to people that will help them succeed. A couple other of these recommendations include promoting community involvement in grant proposals. One of the ways to do that Ben and I are working on right now is to update the public support criteria to include different ways of thinking about community engagement and collaboration, and rewarding projects that clearly demonstrate how community input has shaped the design of a project. So we can help encourage applicants and communities to truly infuse that community need in their process and design. Another is to make nonprofits eligible in WWRP. And the last of the big recommendations in the review were to fund projects that address intersecting challenges, noting that
our lives and our communities cross a lot of different topics at the same time, and that, we don't exist in one sector of the world. We, exist in a lot of different ones, so through scoring criteria, perhaps rewarding projects that specifically consider cultural elements, or specifically include safety related input to help people feel safe and welcome in the spaces that they are creating. And then another to hire a tribal liaison so that we can better foster relationships with our tribes around the state. So 46 recommendations, and we're like, what do we do with this? This is a lot. And so we went through a process to try and prioritize those. We looked primarily at what's the effort needed for each of these and what's our capacity. We looked at what's the impact of each of those, and then also what's the like time horizon, how long would each of these take? And we kind of like crossed all of those. And we came up with our first bucket, which when you look at the bucket, you're like, that's a lot of things. But you just go for it. So the way we've kind of broken down phase one is first into existing efforts. There were some things that we already had the ball rolling, that we were already moving on. One was hiring a tribal liaison. We already requested funding for that, as well as for an equity coordinator that can help drive changes regarding these recommendations. So we received funding from the legislature for that. We already were working on the planning grant program that I mentioned earlier. We're already working on training and learning for our staff so that we can better support communities. And we were working on updating our evaluation panel, our advisory committee charters to make them, to get that broader representation and to just make those improved as well. So we kind of had all that moving, and then we got the equity review finalized, and so a few of the other buckets that we are working on. The first is community engagement, and that is really around expanding our contact lists. PI was like, you keep sending the same outreach to the same people over and over. How are you ensuring that more communities, more organizations, more jurisdictions know about the opportunities that you have? So expanding our contact list, trying to be creative, working across those sectors, and building relationships with them, not just sending out an email and saying, well, we contacted you, but thinking about what are ways that we within the agency can build capacity to foster relationships with people. The next is regarding evaluation criteria. So to use our criteria to more identify high need areas, specifically around data and using metrics, which again, we'll talk about, but using those criteria to close gaps in green space, rewarding engagement and that input from community. And then for the evaluation process, a few of the things that we are thinking about in the short term, beyond remote presentations and advisory committee makeup is also the idea of those guidance documents I mentioned earlier. One example that we're really excited about and hope to move forward on soon is like we have all this project data that's available in our database for them. And it's publicly available. You can go and look up any of them, but there's so much information on there. And so it's kind of tough to navigate. So is there an opportunity for us to make a catalog that has a sample of a few different types of facilities that you might build, so that somebody who's new to the process, or if they want to build something in an area that they, a part of their city that they are less experienced in or something, they can see an example of what costs of this length of trail in this type of setting, or a splash pad in this area. You can have some examples of what some of those past successful projects have looked like. And then the last bucket here is partner-oriented topics. And there are a few recommendations in the review that are kind of outside of the scope or authority of our agency, or would maybe even be better led by a partner organization. And so that might look like an organization convening an event where people can come and learn about different funding streams, or finding ways to, helping to find ways to build capacity for all of you. Or even creating an MOU template. That was something that Prevention Institute noted as a way to help build collaboration between local jurisdictions who are often the applicant and nonprofits in their community. So we have a lot of different pieces kind of in the works. And as I said, this is our phase 1 at this point. And then you might ask, like, well, what does phase 2 look like? And we don't know yet. So that's a great question. We wonder also, and it's gonna, I mean, it depends on a lot of different things, including how phase 1 goes. We see this not as like, oh, well, we did that thing, we're done with it, we'll move on to the next one, but we wanna be continually kind of looking back and reviewing how we've been doing and what changes, the changes that we've made, what impact that has had. And so that will help shape what later phases look like, as well as input from our equity report coordinator and some of the engagement and outreach that they're able to do with some of the communities and applicants. As well as direction from our board. We support the Recreation and Conservation Funding Board. Most of our programs on the recreation side fall under their authority. And so we are interested in hearing, you know, their input and getting direction from them as well as far as priorities that can also be found or identified through SCORE. So let's talk about SCORE, but first. Oh. Brief intermission. Okay, here we go.
As we pass the mic.
Yeah.
I tried to find some like scratchy record player music that would go on with this slide, but yeah, I'm not very good. That's a great summary of our equity review, deep dive summary. Thank you, Leah. I'm going to talk about and shift gears here and focus on the Washington State Recreation and Conservation Plan, which is also known as SCORE. And this has been a plan that's been coming together sort of simultaneously as we've done the equity review. Over the course of the last 2-ish years, we had pretty robust public involvement with this. We had 2 advisory committees, planning committees, running kind of parallel processes with each other to provide advice, input on things like our public engagement plan, the statewide priorities and strategies and goals that come out of the plan itself. And so I'm going to give a little bit of context around what that plan is, how it's developed, talk about a few of the priorities and goals and implementation actions that are probably most relevant to this group in terms of trails and trails funding. So the 2023 Recreation Conservation Plan is our 5-year SCORE plan. SCORE is an acronym that we throw around liberally, and that comes to us from the National Park Service Land and Water Conservation Fund. Our main requirement for doing this plan comes from the Land and Water Conservation Fund and the National Park Service. And this plan is our key to unlocking that funding from the federal government, which comes up to, I don't know, it's $12 or $13 million a year that we spread around the state to fund parks and trails and green space and you know all the good things that we help fund. But this is a partnership plan, so we are generously funded by the Land and Water Conservation Fund to produce this plan. There's a lot of staff involvement with this. We also partner with Eastern Washington University as sort of our research arm that helps us with the recreation participation survey. And I'll talk about that as we get into the discussion a little bit more. But ultimately, the Washington State Recreation and Conservation Plan outlines the strategic direction for the state, investment for state investments in the conservation of public lands and development of outdoor recreation opportunities. So that's a big lift. There's a lot of things that this plan covers. There are a lot of grant programs that this plan covers, including the ones you see here, and probably a couple more that I forgot to put on the slide. But The Land and Water Conservation Fund, the one started there, like I said, is the primary driver for producing this plan. There's also several overlapping state laws that empower us to do comprehensive recreation planning for the state. Like our non-highway off-road vehicle activities program plan that sort of gets folded into this. There's a component of the recreational trails program that requires statewide sort of trails planning, and a number of other sort of more program specific plans. In the past, we have done sort of unique plans for each of these sort of programmatic areas, which, as you can imagine, is a tremendous lift in terms of staff capacity and sort of our focus and ability to do other things that we work on. And so for this edition and actually the previous edition of SCORP, we've kind of been moving towards a place where SCORP acts as the comprehensive plan for all of those things. And so you'll see with this edition, many of the recommendations, the goals, the action items are a much more sort of high level strategic nature that touch on all of the different programs that we work across. Like I said, there's a lot that goes into this. This was an 18-month planning process. There are several people in the room here that were on the advisory committees that helped inform this process. So thank you for all the work that you put into this as well. But kind of starting up in the top corner here, the resident demand survey is a huge information component that helps drive some of the recommendations, findings, and actions that are coming out of the plan. We also put a lot of effort into our public engagement process, which we sort of funneled through what we call the hub. And it was a website that we built that handled multiple surveys and disseminated information about our planning process. We did a couple of companion surveys to the resident demand survey, which I'll touch on here in a little bit. One was the outdoor experience survey. Some of you might have taken it. Some of you might have taken the resident demand survey. We also did a survey of public land managers and recreation providers. And so the land managers, the nonprofit advocacy groups that help facilitate outdoor recreation experiences, we surveyed all of them about their needs and challenges, management priorities, things like that. We also, for the first time, did a tribal engagement survey. And so we sent a survey request out to all the natural resource directors of the 29 tribes in Washington. And we got a little good participation from that. The map inventory down here in the lower corner, we do every 5 years sort of a comprehensive mapping exercise of outdoor recreation opportunities, experiences. We partner with Jennifer Hackett at Washington Hometown to get the data for that mapping exercise. And also if there's stuff that you see that is missing or needs to be updated, Jennifer's a great person to get in touch with to help us kind of keep on top of that data management. But we did some innovative things with this edition of the map inventory that I'll talk about again in a little bit. Like I said, we had 2 advisory committees that sort of helped provide input into both the public engagement planning and the sort of output of this plan. We had a staff team, we had board input, we presented to the board on this 5 or 6 times over the course of 18 months to working on it. And then again, public review of the draft plan and feedback and sort of a revision process there before we release the final plan, which sort of culminates in what we call the action or the outdoor action compass. You can see sort of our priorities and sort of high level strategies encompassed by the graphic there. There's a lot of information that's available online, and if you click on the QR code there, you can take you directly to our hub site, which continues to exist and has a place where you can download the actual publication, which I have a couple copies here. If people want a hard copy, I can get you one of those. But I want to highlight a few things that are on that hub site, like the map inventory, and a couple of things that we did with this inventory that were a little different than we've done in the past. And so you can see on the main slide there, the map. The 23,000 miles of trails in the state, there's 13,000 recreation points, which are individual facilities like a campground or a park or a playground, swimming pool, water access site, etc. 22 million acres of public lands across the state. It's a huge amount of public lands and recreation opportunity. One of the things that we wanted to do with this edition was sort of drill down into different types of opportunities, like access to parks and natural areas, access to trails, and down there on the end, access to water. And so we did sort of a spatial analysis looking at who has access to these opportunities from a multimodal access point of view. And we looked at a 10-minute walk, a 15-minute bike ride, and a 15-minute drive or transit ride to access the place. So we mapped out, and you can see sort of as you get from lighter to darker that 15-minute drive to bike ride to walk sort of radius around facilities, and you can start to see where there are gaps and opportunities at those different things. And so that is one of the things that we're starting to look at as we make adjustments to evaluation criteria is how do we hone in on those places where there are not access points within that sort of, commonly practiced 15-minute walk or 10-minute walk radius or 15-minute bike ride. So all of this information is available on that website. You can go ahead and you can play with the map, you can click around, you can search by different features, you can search by land managers, you can sort and filter. There's a lot involved there, and it takes a little bit of time, admittedly, to get used to the interface and figure out how to manipulate it and search for the things that you're looking for. But there's a lot there, and it's really, I think, a powerful tool for us to take a look at. And for folks like yourselves to use in your grant applications as you're talking about need and things like that. Pointing to some of this data is super helpful. I'm gonna pass through these slides real quickly. Just these are some statistics coming out of some of those surveys that we administered, like the land manager survey. Here you can see what some of the top priorities and top issues are from a land manager perspective. Top motivations from our experience survey. This was more sort of a supplement to the recreation demand survey, which was asking people about, what are you looking for when you go outside? What kind of experience you want to have? What things do you want more access to? No surprise, trails was at the top of that list. Among other things like camping and opportunities to access winter recreation. All rated very highly. Backwards. The resident demand survey, we broke up the survey into 10 different activity categories. Surveyed, I think it was 77 or 78 individual activities across those activity categories. And you can see on the right side of the slide there, some of the top 3 activities in each of the categories. We also have that information broken down by different regions across the state. We use 10 different regions to kind of more hone in on what are some of the differences in popularity of different opportunities or different activities within different regions across the state. And so that's a little more helpful to kind of hone in on a little more place-based where we should be driving funding for different activities. So all of this kind of goes into our 4 statewide priorities and our 7 strategies for implementation. And there's a lot here, there's a lot couched within each of these priorities and strategies, and I'm going to touch on a few of them. The 4 priorities are really sort of like our vision for the state and where we want to be within the next 5 years, and sort of outcome focused, aspirational goals. And priorities for the state. So things like providing meaningful access to outdoor recreation for all, protecting natural and cultural resources while managing increasing demand. Demonstrating the essential nature of natural areas, parks, and recreation infrastructure. And supporting healthy, adaptable, and connected communities. And that last one is where you see a lot of the recommendations or goals around sort of trails and trails connectivity and things like that. The strategies on the right side are really our agency and the Recreation Conservation Planning Board's implementation plan for how are we going to work to advance some statewide priorities here on the website. And some of those things we're working on right now. We have sort of an implementation schedule that you can see, year 1 all the way through year 5. This is a 5-year plan. We're required to update it every 5 years from the according to the National Park Service. And so in year 1, we're really focused on that strategy 1, strategy 2, strategy 4, and 5, which the first one is updating our grant evaluation criteria to reflect statewide priorities goals. A lot of the actions within this strategy are sort of complementary and overlapping with the recommendations coming out of the equity review. And that's the one instance. We looked long and hard and sort of crosswalk the equity review recommendations with the recommendations from our advisory committees and what we heard from the public to really try to hone in and make these things complementary so that as we're talking to folks like yourselves across the state or legislators when we're talking about our funding programs, we kind of have 2 things backing us up, saying that, you know, we heard this pre-storm, we also heard this in the equity review. We're kind of all marching to the same beat here. So I think we'll get into a little bit more detail on the evaluation criteria and some updates that we're looking at for that here in a minute. A couple other of the strategies that I want to touch on. Again, I'll dive into this a little bit more here in a minute, but review and revise grant program policies to adapt to emerging community needs. It's sort of like things are always changing on the ground. There's always new information, new challenges emerging, and so we want to be reflective of community needs with our grant programs and how do we best address things that are emerging and trends that are emerging in the state. A couple of the actions from this are, you know, things like identifying and reducing barriers to access our grant programs. So some of the recommendations that we had talked about coming out of the equity reviews, that idea, and we're working together to look at our processes and to figure out how to do that. Another one, support and promote multi-site projects to address land needs across recreation and public land systems. So how can applicants submit, you know, one project to support multiple sites across their portfolio of land holdings? Strategy 4, maintain and improve data, decision support, and technical assistance. We have a lot, as you saw, of data and information in those maps. We also have a side project going on, updating the Washington State Trails database. Many of you have been involved in conversations around that project. It's sort of slowly continuing to gain momentum, and we're adding new data to that all the time. But you know, how do we as an agency, you know, we often get these funding, initiatives from the legislature to do things like update the public lands inventory or update the state trails database. And it's a one-time thing. And so we do that and we put a lot of effort behind that. And then it sort of sits on a shelf for, several years until we get another, influx funding to do that again. So we're trying to figure out within the agency, how do we staff those things? How do we maintain and keep those things current so that it's more useful to folks out there in the community? Strategy 5, improve and expand community engagement practices. This is more of a continuation of some of those public surveys that we did to inform this plan. how can we do more frequent updates to the recreation plan surveys? We have a better picture of trends, besides just a snapshot every 5 years. Store plan. Are there ways that we can improve that survey mechanism and normalize it with other similar outdoor recreation use domain surveys that are happening both within the state and nationally, so we can start to compare how are we doing as a state to other places across the country. Those are some of the things that we're looking at for at least coming out of the sewer plan for how do we improve this in your community. And so what's next? We mentioned grant criteria updates a couple of times. We're gonna talk about that in a little bit. I'm gonna talk about another policy project that we're working on for our youth athletic facilities program. Again, we're trying to figure out a way to staff up and build capacity within our agencies, maintain those data support tools, and then supporting emerging programs like the Planning for Recreation Access program we talked about. We do plan on running another grant round of that in the spring, I believe, and taking in applications for more planning grants. Other programs like the community forest program we established a couple of years ago is a super exciting program that offers great opportunities for the community to come together and have a little bit more local control around forest based and how the forest is managed. There's a couple of new programs that are out there. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it back over to Leah to talk about our grant criteria updates. And yeah.
Thanks, Ben. So mentioned it a couple of times, but we're updating criteria, grant criteria. And we wanted to provide kind of an overview and share a little bit about what that project looks like. Because these are changes that we're hoping to implement for the spring grant round. In the above projects. So these are changes that we're looking at in WWRP, trails, local parks, water access, as well as land and water conservation fund, ALEA, aquatic lands enhancement account, and youth athletic facilities program. And so those are the programs we're looking at, but really, if you think about like what are the goals of us to make these changes? Yeah, we're responding to recommendations for the equity review, but ultimately, we are hoping to do a few things. For like kind of the pinnacle is to reduce gaps in access to facilities. To think about how we can encourage applicants to engage with their communities so that we end up with facilities that are the things that people need and the things that people want. So that, well, yeah, and to really help underinvested communities as well that have not been able to unlock or access this type of funding stream before. The ones that we are looking at include need satisfaction, project support, and expansion and renovation. And this is a project that we've been working on pretty much all year. We had a public comment period, and originally we had planned to take this to the Recreation and Conservation Funding Board for decision later this month. But we made the decision to delay that a bit and continue to do a bit more engagement as well, but still with the hopes of implementing for spring 24. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these criteria and what changes we are exploring right now. The first, which I now realize is not on here, is a hidden one because maybe it's unscored. We're looking at adding an unscored project introduction for these programs. And that's something that some applicants already do this. This won't be a change for them. They give a brief kind of overview of this is my project, this is kind of the general idea of what we're doing, this is where we are, before launching in. Some applicants don't know to do that, or they don't cover that level of things kind of early in their presentation. So you get halfway through and an evaluator is kind of still going, what are they building? I'm not sure. And so this is a kind of common with the way that we're thinking about a number of these changes, is like, is unlocking that key. There are things that successful people who go through this process successfully over time know to do, and we're hoping to make those things kind of more explicit so that other people have that information as well, and you don't have to put in all of that time and effort to do it that many times to know. And so we are looking at adding an unscored project introduction that will just be kind of 1 to 2 minutes, quick overview before launching in. And then next, looking at need, you might be familiar that right now we ask for folks in their presentations to use our grant application data tool and include information about demographics or socioeconomic information in their presentations. Which the feedback that we get is like, wait, RCO has this data, and then you want me to take it from your tool and then tell it to you. And so we are proposing that we eliminate that tool, and instead we have some RCO scored points that the applicant doesn't have to kind of go through the ringer to figure out what form they present this information in. But instead, there would be objective criteria that are scored in PRISM. And in the ideal scenario, when you would place your project point, you would be able to see how you would score against those 3 objective criteria. So the applicant would know even before they've gone and submitted their application, how they would stand against those criteria. So we're looking at how we can get rid of kind of this complicated roundabout application data tool, incorporate a few objective measures, some of which are using the environmental health disparities map, which is a tool on the Department of Health's website, that a number of other agencies are using as well. But also we're trying to be very mindful of the fact that the data is only tells so much. When we're here as RCO looking at kind of our statewide priorities, there are things at the local level we might lose a lot of granularity. And so we heard very loud and clear while developing our planning grant program, while going through this process, that you still need a strong opportunity to be able to describe what's happening where you are, and what the community is like. Because, like, for example, if you're looking at census tract data, maybe the only space available is in a wealthier area, but on the other side of the street is a low income area, and people from both sides of the street are using that facility. But you lose that level when you're looking at it with the kind of statewide data level. And so there are some limitations. So we are continuing to suggest for our board that we continue to have a strong narrative component to describing need, and that we're really mindful of how we weight those 2 things in the process, not saying, okay, these data related measures are going to account for 90% of need, but you can have a little bit, but really thinking through how we can help tell that story through a couple of different means. With regards to need satisfaction, this is a criteria that looks different in different programs at RCO. Some programs talk about how will this project, as you've designed it, meet the needs that you've described. Well, other projects don't have need satisfaction, but they talk about what's the scope of the project. And so we're trying to bring a bit more consistency across these programs. One of the reasons for that is to help simplify for when applicants are using multiple of our grants to match one another. So they're not having to like go back to the drawing board and go, wait, what was this wording is like a little bit different. How does that relate to this other program? And so instead of having a need satisfaction criteria, we have broken that up to have one for project scope and one for project design. And some of what we're getting at with these is to simplify them. If you are familiar with our manuals, you know that for like a project design criteria, I think the criteria is like a page long. And it's like, here are the things that you can address in this. And the idea when we developed that wasn't that every project would address all of the bullet points on that page. So it's relevant to your project. But what you end up with is people who haven't gone through the process don't know that. They have a more difficult time navigating that. And so with the help of the technical work group and public comment, we've tried to really whittle that down and say, what are the most vital things that we need to know about? And the other stuff is good, but do we have to know that? Is that just adding kind of some more complication? So with scope and design, we're really trying to kind of simplify those and get down to the nuts and bolts. We've also asked in project design, thinking about how a project budget was developed. Some of the feedback that we received was like, you got an evaluation panel, but they don't live in my community, they might not know how expensive it is to build whatever on an island, for example. And so we're thinking about, instead of looking at like, you know, I'm having to assess those details for maybe something that's not my expertise, instead asking, how did you develop your budget? Tell me about the research that you did that led to you coming up with these numbers, and how your level of confidence in them. So that we can see how applicants have gone through kind of the due diligence of the research that they need in order to develop their project budget. With regard to project support, right now, our criteria are like, did you engage the public, and like, here are some ideas, or like, here are the ways that you might have done that, with a long list of things that are very quantitative. It's a lot, for a number of programs, it turns into like, how many projects, or it might be challenging if you live in a neighborhood that is like a pocket park, and there's not like, everybody in the city isn't gonna come and use it, so you don't have as many letters, for example. But what we really wanna get at is, who did you engage, and why is that important for where this project is? That's gonna look different in different parts of the state, in different parts of cities even. So tell us, what's the relevance of that population that you engage and their input for the demographics in your area, or for the needs of that community? And then also we wanna ask kind of similarly for partnerships. You know, what partnerships do you have? Partnerships, we heard from the earlier panel, like they make the world go round. But different types and levels and numbers of partnerships are available in different types of areas around the state, and it's not something that we can, it's hard when you're looking at it like just by the numbers. And then another piece that we are looking to include under project support is related to design, but during, well, I guess, oh, it's still the project support here. We're changing it to public engagement. Because we look at it more broadly than just the support, but it's more of the process that you went through. So for during your engagement, how did that process lead to you receiving input from your community, and what did you do with that? Like, okay, great, you engaged this amount of your population and they came to your public meetings, but what did you do with what they wanted? How have you incorporated that into the design of your project to make sure that the end user is getting what they need and what they want in their community? And then the final criteria here is the expansion and renovation criteria. And this is something that exists mostly, I think, primarily in WWRP, local parks and water access. So I think it's noted as kind of a sub-bullet in the trails category as well. But this is points for projects that are expanding existing facilities or renovating existing facilities. And looking at kind of the process that Ben has led through SCORP and new priorities of the state, and the findings from the equity review that says that our grants skew toward places with existing green space, the field is like bonus points for existing parks. And there's something very important and necessary about maintaining what we have, and making sure sites don't fall into disrepair. But we believe that that is a need that can be described through the need criteria, and that we don't need to be adding kind of double points for those types of projects. And so we're suggesting eliminating this particular criteria, and that projects expanding and renovating can be discussed and illustrated in other parts of the evaluation criteria. Do you have anything to add?
Really?
Okay,
Really,
thanks. Did I go over? So that's kind of our plan for kind of in the criteria change bucket of the phase one bucket. And as I said, we had a technical work group of about 30 people from around the state who helped shape kind of what we built here. We had a public comment process that we've taken more input from. We've gotten input from our board on several occasions. And now we'll do a bit more outreach, but hopefully we can kind of turn this around and implement for spring of 24. I'll note too, some of you might apply for our fall programs and be thinking, what does this mean for NOVA and RTP, for example? And right now, the programs that I showed earlier is the scope of this project. So we, I think, have an interest in still in kind of looking at those programs, but we haven't, we still need to look at whether like these changes are appropriate for those categories also, or whether it looks different when you're looking at backcountry trails. And so there's, I think, more to come on that, but I did want to highlight too, that that's not something we would kind of like, okay, we got approval on this, we'll plug it in there. That any changes that we make to criteria like that, we will engage our stakeholders and run a public process, and we would be interested in input from others as well on their thoughts around kind of rolling any changes or changes, not even rolling, other changes that could be made to other programs as well. Okay. We have, I think, one more slide.
As they're basically keeping you all from lunch, I'll go quickly. I just wanted to touch on one other policy project that we're working on for the Youth Athletic Facilities Program, which we are taking to the board for decision in October. And there are a couple, there's 4 policies that we're looking to adjust in this program. But I think the one that I'm most excited about, and the thing that I think is most relevant to what we're talking about today, the SCORE priorities and the equity review, is this idea of sliding scale grants. And so this is the pilot sort of concept that we're looking at. In the YAF program, certain eligible communities have an opportunity to have their match reduced, sometimes all the way down to 10% of the total project costs. Typically, you require a 1-to-1 or 50% match. And so this is not, so that was that implementation of the match reduction policy was sort of our first step in trying to lift up or elevate opportunities for under-resourced communities. And we implemented that a couple of years ago. It was noted in, we've observed this, and also it was noted in the equity review that when you do that, there's a funding gap that is created between what, a 50-50 match requirement gives you in terms of buying power with your grant, and a 10% match gives you in terms of buying power. And so this sliding scale grant concept would help us fill that gap. And essentially, as your match obligation is reduced, your grant limit would be able to go up. And so there'd be sort of these graduated steps of increasing grant opportunity as your match obligation goes down. So we're going to talk a lot more about that at the Recreation Conservation Funding Board meeting in October. If folks have questions about how that's going to work, I think we still have questions about how that's going to work, but we'll try to answer them together. But that's one of the sort of pilot initiatives that we're trying to implement here in the next year. So fingers crossed, assuming that the board approves that, we'll be looking to roll that out for in the Youth Athletic Facilities Program and see how that goes, and perhaps go back forward into other programs if it's successful. So that's all we have. I know we went a little bit over time, so I apologize.
I think we're fine. Do we have questions? You've done a mighty fine job.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't have a mic, but we have some questions back there.
I'm curious about your continued outreach and engagement for, the public engagement this fall. Was there a gap in what groups you anticipated to get feedback from, or were there particular, questions in the data that you got back from that engagement, or what's the goal of extending that period?
I'll take a stab at it and Leah, you can go ahead. Yeah, I think this project has been pretty condensed, just the timing of it from the get-go. And we've had, the development of our 30%, technical advisory committee, the development of the concepts for the new criteria, the proposed criteria. All of that's been pretty rushed, and we were trying to get it, approved by the rec board in October, so that we would have more time on the back end to talk about what those changes were with potential applicants and do that sort of back end outreach. I think we realized through the public engagement process that, yeah, I think there were some communities that we need to hear more from. And so we're gonna extend that process and do some intentional and direct outreach to try to get more robust feedback. The public review and comment period was really short for that. And so, yeah, I think we're gonna probably open that back up and continue to receive more feedback.
Thanks, I want to just express my appreciation for the work that RCO did, the equity analysis. I'm guessing the work that your facilitator did in reaching out to the applicants, whether they're successful or not, because I read the feedback. Some of it is brutally honest, and I just applaud public agencies for being able to take feedback and hearing when some correction is needed in-house. So great work, and I've seen that follow through and the stuff you're doing. So it sounds like then that if you're doing this extended public input period, that then the policies for those particular programs won't be adopted till later, and then the manuals won't be adopted, so that this upcoming round, the manuals will stay the same. Is that the case?
No, well, our goal is to still get the proposed evaluation criteria adopted in advance of the 2024 grant round. If that is able to happen, then the manuals will be quickly updated with that new criteria and published prior to, I think the grant round opens in March. And then we will also do extensive outreach and engagement to make sure people are aware of those changes.
Okay, and I had another question. This may be tough for you to answer, but being that the planning and recreation access grant isn't exclusively, but it's probably largely used by underserved communities to fund their PROS planning, their long-range parks planning, bootstrap themselves, but they can unlock the big dollars at RCO. Has there been any discussions about for those communities that are involved in that process to allow them to apply for WWRP or other grants that mostly require a long-range parks plan to be adopted, if they're kind of making some sort of benchmarks, demonstrable progress in their long-range parks planning, because it seemed a shame if, they apply for PRA because they're under-resourced communities, and to make them have to wait a whole other biennium to apply for WRP. It seems like that's a way that you can kind of help smush down that access.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's, I think in our timing of PRA, I think we've got. Originally, we were like, oh, this will line up perfectly, but because of a new program and ironing out a few things, it took a little longer than we had expected. And then a great thing happened. We got an influx of funding from the legislature to add more money so that we could fund more of the 99 applications that we received. But so those are even like a few months further behind than the other projects. So it's not lining up quite perfectly. And so that's one of the things that question is like on my desk to talk to our director about how we can help ensure that those entities are moving forward in their processes and how open the door is to be able to allow them to apply, because the way that their application or their projects are set up right now, they wouldn't be completed by the time that any funding was even received. And so we would just need to make sure that, we require that planning to be done in other programs for good reason. But if we can help, if we can understand the process that the applicant, has a PRA grant, if they're an applicant in the new program, if we can understand their process, and maybe they even have some of the information that would go in their plan that would support the need for their new application, just the product isn't finalized yet, then we would look for opportunities to be able to support them in that.
Hi, thank you. This is really interesting and I look forward to diving into it online. I'm curious about what kind of dissemination plan you have for Washington state legislators. Do you work with their staff? Do you have kind of an outreach, giving them a outreach program, giving them the highlights of this? What can we as WTA members or as citizens, what can we do to point to this and when can we point to it? What would you like us to say? Thanks.
Well, we have, the report is on our website, I'm excited to dive in. But as far as what we do, we have a legislative director who works closely with legislators and our stakeholders. I went on a couple wegislative tours this summer with legislators who are interested in learning more about our CO funded sites. And those are great opportunities, like we're at a playground with a representative while her kids were on the playground and getting to talk to her directly about the work that we're doing here. So that's the way that we do it. As we get closer also to session, then our legislative director will be doing more direct outreach as well. But as far as what you can do, I think that that's up for you to decide. What you like, you can, advocate for yourself for what feels right for your organization. But if you have any questions about what we are working on or the direction that we're headed, we're happy to provide that to you so that you can work forward. And if there are things that end up aligning between your priorities and our priorities, then we would love that.
And we have one more, I know, hold on lunch, we'll push back the start of the afternoon session. I have one question from online. Are grants awarded that focus on environmental protection, climate change, tree canopy, removal of invasive species, use of native plantings?
Yes. Many of the programs that we talked about here are for more of our active recreation opportunities, parks, trails, playgrounds and stuff. But there's a whole half of the Washington Wildlife and Recreation Program that focuses on habitat preservation, restoration, climate resiliency and things like that. Riparian program, the wildlife program are all great opportunities within the Washington Wildlife and Recreation sort of umbrella to achieve something local.
Okay, great, thank you very much. Well, thank you, Dan and Leah. I'm sorry, any other questions?
Director. I am representing the Puget Sound Pacific project in our collaborative effort around a raise grant and also to complete gaps. So I'll tell you more about that soon.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Richard Fields. I work for the Nation, Southwest Washington. I work in their DNR engineering office, focusing on traffic.
Hello, I'm Dwayne Valentine, the Iowa Nation. Work with Portia here. We have in our office our own planners, safety coordinators, engineers, surveyors, and so I'm part of that team. I'm an engineer there, and here because of safety. So here we are.
Hello, I'm Brian Wood with Washington State Department of Transportation's Active Transportation Division. We're a rapidly growing division. We were only 3 of us, about a year ago, and now we're up to 8, and continuing to grow. And some of the reasons for that are our Complete Streets initiative, in the state. I am a grant administrator for the pedestrian bicycle program. I'm the state bicycle and pedestrian coordinator. And I work on a lot of technical assistance and so forth for within our agency and with grantees and others interested in that transportation.
Good afternoon, Ben Donatelli, again with the Washington State Recreation and Conservation Office. I'm a policy specialist. I think I probably covered most of this morning. But for those that weren't here, yeah, policy specialist. I've been with the agency for about 7 years now. Prior to my role as a policy specialist, I was a grant manager on deputy team and worked on a lot of our trail programs as well.
Well, great. Thank you so much, panelists, for being here again. I guess we're gonna get straight over to our first panel member to speak will be Ben Donatelli.
Thanks, Casey. So I didn't prepare slides for this. I don't have a lot, I think, to say. I want to highlight or touch on a few things that I spoke about from SORT planning this morning. And then I'm going to highlight our 3 grant programs that we offer that fund trails primarily. And I think to kick it off, you know, trails for us at RCO, and from what we heard from the public across the board in the state, we're doing our SORT planning. Trails are really, really valuable. They're opportunities to connect with nature, to get outside, to exercise, to improve mental health as well as physical health. They connect people to destinations, to recreate, to work, to do all of the things that they do here in daily life. And so it's no surprise, and then trails, survey after survey, rose to the top as some of the most desirable things that people want in terms of outdoor recreation opportunities. From our resident participation survey, the demand survey that we call it, that we contract with Eastern Washington University on, 90 and 91% of respondents to that survey either walked, hiked, or rolled in some fashion on a trail in the last year. It was by far the most participated in activity was trails-based walking, hiking, or rolling. And by rolling, I mean using some kind of a personal mobility device, mobility device, and etc. 42% of people participated in backpacking. 40% of people participated in road cycling. 35% of people participated in jogging or running on trails, and 35% of people participated in snowshoeing. Most of those activities saw exponential growth over the last from our previous recreation demand survey. So it's the demand survey in 2017. I would say all of those activities, backpacking, road cycling, jogging, and snowboarding, showed double-digit increases in participation, which kind of was when it just speaks to, I think, the time and environment that we're in, you know, and people looking to get outside in a safe and socially distant way. Trails facilitate that incredibly. So super important in terms of investment from RCO and looking for opportunities to partner and collaborate with other agencies and organizations to leverage the limited funding that we have for trails and have a greater impact moving ahead in the future. And I think having panels and discussions like this is a great step forward in that process. Couple other things from our participation survey. Top 3 reasons why people want to get outside using trails or other outdoor recreation facilities. Number 1 was to relax. Number 2 was to enjoy or spend time in nature. And number 3 was to exercise or improve physical or mental health. all of those above 90% response rates, for those top 3 kind of reasons why people wouldn't get outside. Again, trails are a phenomenal mechanism for facilitating all of those things. Our experience survey, that sort of supplemental survey that we did to ask people about, what are the things that they're looking for when they go out to recreate, what are the types of experiences and facilities that they're looking for. We asked about what more things do you want to have access to. 79% of respondents to that survey said that they wanted more access to non-motorized trails. Similarly, we asked about motivating factors for getting outside. What are the most significant motivators that would increase the amount of time that you spend recreating outdoors? The top answer to that was more opportunities near where I live. 79% of people said more opportunities near where I live. 64% of people said better facilities near where I live. 58% of people said more parking. I think we heard about that this morning a little bit. And then 50% of people said better neighborhood access. So close to home opportunities to get out in nature, on trails, loud and clear, we heard that. And so that's reflected in some of the statewide priorities, like providing meaningful access to outdoor recreation for all. We have a goal of seeing a broad spectrum of parks, trails, public lands, and water access opportunities that are available for a diversity of recreation opportunities and users. We have in our implementation plan a number of actions that speak to supporting integrated solutions to land use and recreation, or resource conservation, community development, public health and safety challenges. Talking about that collaboration among agencies and how do we as RCO help to facilitate that, spur conversation. Again, I think panels like this, having forums like the Trails Caucus here is a great way that we can just spark those conversations. It goes on and on. I think people can read the score, people can look at the website and see the recommendations in there. I want to touch on our 3 trails programs that, if I can find them in my notes, where they go. There we are. That we administer that primarily fund trail infrastructure development and supporting facilities for trails. And that's the WWRP, Washington Wildlife and Recreation Programs Trails category. That's the primary program that we administer that supports active transportation type of trails, the rails to trails type of facilities, wider, multi-use pathways and things like that. That program is couched under the Washington Wildlife and Recreation Program, and so the funding for that program varies with the allocation that we receive from the legislature. Typically, the last several bienniums, it's been to the tune of 7 to 9 million annually, or biannually. That's not enough to close all of the gaps that we know exist in the state trails system. And so, this is why, again, I think this panel is really important to understand opportunities where we can pitch in to help support trails facilities and where that support can be leveraged for other programs like what Brian runs through WatchDOT. And how do we get those programs working together to make a bigger impact? I want to briefly mention NOVA is more our sort of backcountry-ish focused recreation program. And that's the non-highway off-road vehicle activities program. Roughly that comes to us through the state fuel tax. A percentage of the gas tax is allocated to the NOVA account. Most of that money comes to RCO. A small portion of it is allocated directly to state parks, fish and wildlife, and Department of Natural Resources. But again, the vast majority of that funding comes to us, and we administer that through the competitive program. that can fund motorized, non-motorized, multi-use trails. The stipulation with that program is that the trails must be accessed by a road that has not been supported in the state gas tax, whether constructed or maintained. And so it generally focuses the funding in places that are more backcountry oriented. And the Forest Service roads and DNR roads, and Fish and Wildlife roads and things like that. I bring it up because there's an issue that we've been tracking in the state that has to do with decrease in revenues from fuel tax as fuel efficiency goes up, which is great, like good for the environment. But that program being reliant on the fuel tax, we've seen a decrease in the revenue coming into that account over the last several years. That in addition to, as the state looks to a transitioning away from a state fuel tax program and more towards a road usage charge idea, pay by the mile kind of system, we want to make sure that the opportunity to fund that backcountry recreation exists and is maintained into the future. And so we're tracking that in our job and policy job. We're engaged with the State Transportation Commission and other folks who are kind of thinking through that road usage charge transition and thoroughly advocating for the maintaining the NOVA fund moving forward into the future. The third program I'll talk about is the recreational trails program. It's a smaller program. We only get about $3.5 million of that by every biennium. But that comes to us from the Federal Highways Administration. It's a federal program that is passed through to us and we administer it on behalf of the state. I bring it up because in Washington, we have focused the use of the recreational trails program funds on a very specific use of trails, and that's backlog maintenance of backcountry recreation focused trails. As the funding comes to us, RTP can be used for a wide variety of anything trail related, whether it's backcountry trails, front country, rails to trails, multimodal pathways. It can be used for anything. We have made the choice here in Washington State to focus that funding program on backcountry recreation. But it's not to say that there aren't other opportunities that we could use that funding if it were in the interest of the trails community to advance multimodal trails, for example. It's not something that we're actively exploring within our skill right now, but I think it's an interesting point and an interesting dynamic that we have in our debate. It's a little bit different use of how other states use the recreational trail program. Again, it's not a lot of money. It makes a tremendous impact where it is hitting the ground right now, and the organizations that take advantage of that funding source really need that. And so if there was a change to that funding source, we need to figure out a way to supplement and support the organizations that are continually using it. And so I don't know where that leaves us, but it's an interesting sort of dynamic of that program. Yeah, and that sort of brings us back to sort of the federal nexus and sort of covering all bases of state, local, federal opportunities that at least we administer in our skill. So I'm gonna stop talking now and hand it over to Brian. And Brian's gonna talk about the DOT administration.
Okay, so we just talked about the funding programs in RCO, and this discussion here will be on WSTC's role in funding active transportation around the state. Oak's role.
Jacob, we might need help to transition just on the arrow key.
Yeah.
Oh, I see it's on a. Okay, so there are many funding sources that could involve active transportation. Those listed here play a stronger role in that arena. I'm most familiar with the Active Transportation Division funding programs and with our Agency Complete Streets Directive. I'll say a few words about one of the local program grants and one from public transportation division as well. All of these programs are biennial offerings. The box at the bottom is got the LEAP funding. Our division helps facilitate legislatively directed LEAP funds for active transportation projects, but we do not work directly with those projects in terms of recommending them to the legislature. That means the Climate Commitment Act has definitely helped active transportation. WSTC also understands our responsibility to provide benefits to vulnerable populations in overburdened communities and to our tribal partners. Next. Both local programs and our public transportation division provide grants that offer benefits for active transportation. The city safety program is focused on local roads where there's been serious injury or fatality, while the regional mobility grant has the primary purpose of reducing vehicular travel. Neither program has a strong trail, regional trail nexus though. But any given project might align with a particular trail of interest. Next slide. And so here are the three funding programs our active transportation division manages. And as much money as it looks like, there's a lot of money compared to what you just described there, but they're very competitive, very oversubscribed, and transportation projects that touch roads cost a lot of money. So the third program there is an invitation only program or pilot really that this time. And next slide. Safe Routes to School is funding that helps kids walk and bike to school. Applicants generally must be owner-operators of the roads where work is proposed. Projects must be door to door. The primary emphasis on safety and equity is next. Coming every 2 years, the next call for projects is early 2024. There are two types of projects: construction and development design only. Construction projects fund all project phases, including right-of-way. Development design only starts with a need, but no known solution. Through public outreach, a solution or solutions is identified and is then designed to a shovel-ready status. Match is considered for larger jurisdictions, but it's completely optional. Sometimes these projects will develop trail improvements, which may have a nexus with regional trail interest. And next. The pedestrian bicycle program funding is similar to Safe Routes to School, but without the need to focus on schools. Eligibility and review criteria are otherwise the same. They follow the same cycle, and the same two types of projects are eligible. For both programs, the objective is complete facilities for biking and walking, and ignoring one mode reduces consideration that a project is given. It is not uncommon for pedestrian and bicycle program projects to target regional trail development. Shared use paths, regional trails, meet these safety objectives, and they provide complete facilities for both pedestrians and bicycles. And they often connect our equity-focused communities to resources. Next slide. Sandy Williams Connecting Communities program is an invitation-only pilot. It is focused on high-equity needs communities that have been divided by highway infrastructure. WSTC works with the communities to bridge the division and restore access to destination for all community members. The solution or solutions may involve a shared use path, which may connect to or be part of a regional path system. But our goal is to work with community plans rather than to impose external interests on the community. Next slide. And here is an example of a regional trail section that was recently funded by the pedestrian and bicycle program. As noted, shared use paths rank high for safety and serve both pedestrians and bicycles. The award here is the highest offered since the program's inception in 2005. We don't ever set an award maximum, but active transportation value rather than recreation value is a primary evaluation criteria, and equity is a top priority. We want to know how a project helps people without cars safely get from home to school, to work, to the grocery store, and wherever else they need to go. And next slide. Complete Streets is not a program, but a directive. It is a way of understanding and designing state highways to serve all users. It affects almost all our projects in population centers where the highway is legally open to pedestrian and bicycle use. In many cases, the best solution to serve active transportation along highways is the shared use path. So the nexus with regional trail interests can be relatively high. Next slide. The legislation is comprehensive. WSDOT must identify where active transportation facilities are incomplete or where they are not the right treatment given the roadway conditions. Crossings are specifically called out, which are often where we see serious injuries and fatalities. Next slide. Unfortunately, we are used to seeing highways like the top image. People walk and bike there anyway, usually because they have to. The bottom image shows a complete street on State Route 105 in Westport. Granted, it is a different context, but walking and biking facilities can be designed to work for any context, and roads can be changed to match a changing context. Next slide. Being able to properly see a crossing in time to respond is a minimum need. There are many ways crossings can be improved to make them work well for all road users. Next slide. Although WSDOT owns state highways, we are a partner with the jurisdictions they pass through. Our goal is to work with local agencies and tribes to make improvements that align with existing plans or work together to develop plans where they don't exist. Next slide. Speed management is a strategy for right-sizing speeds in a way that is self-enforcing. Most people don't speed through neighborhoods, both because of the lower speed limit and because of the way they're designed. Our highways have often been designed to encourage that higher speed throughput. That usually creates conflicts when the highway goes through a community. Lowering speeds and designing roads to match those speeds can reduce all types of crashes. This makes it easier for pedestrians and bicyclists to get around, but it also reduces delay due to crashes between motorists. Next slide. The legislation takes us from identifying to collaborating to constructing. New facilities that meet the complete streets legislation are in design right now, and many more are on the way. Complete Streets does not have separate funding though. It is part of the regular road work we do. So the improvements are piecemeal as they are aligned to the project limits and as funding is available for that regular road work we do. And next slide. WSDOT's Complete Streets website links to all the relevant information. Our project delivery memo outlines what the agency is doing to meet the legislation. Level of traffic stress is a core tool for guiding us to the right solutions. Next slide. This table from our State Active Transportation Plan helps us understand what WSDOT means by level of traffic stress, LTS. LTS 1 is almost no interaction in traffic. LTS 2 is our criterion level to meet complete streets. Almost everyone should be able to use facilities designed in LTS 2, including most people with disabilities. Next slide. This slide just illustrates LTS. LTS is high when speeds and traffic volumes are high, when there are many lanes, when there is minimal separation from traffic, and when crossing distances are wide and people are more exposed to motorists. Next slide. The safe system approach is a way of designing and operating a transportation system to prevent serious injuries and fatalities. WSDOT's arena for this is safe roads. Speeds that match the users that are out there, separation of users in space, time, and making it easier for drivers to see vulnerable users are all important elements. Next slide. WSDOT's Complete Streets Design Memo also refers to route directness. With a transportation system designed around cars, the availability of low traffic stress crossings can be poorly suited to walking and biking. Pedestrians in particular often must go far out of their way to travel between destinations. This slide shows that there can be both physical barriers due to the lack of a nearby crossing altogether and functional ones where the crossing is available, but it's not suited to all ages and abilities. Slide. This roundabout replaces an intersection where crosswalks were only provided on 2 lanes, and even those crossings were very high traffic stress. The roundabout now allows a direct path from a home to a destination, but also significantly improves crossing safety by lowering speed of the crossing, changing the angles of interaction, and allowing active travelers to take one travel direction at a time. And stay on that last slide. Complete Streets and the funding programs discussed are not specifically focused on regional trails. But the goals of regional trail advocates often align with those of active transportation needs. WSDOT's programs and directives are usually focused on agencies or tribal governments who are owner-operators of roads. The best way to ensure that regional trail interests are accounted for is to get regional trail plans into local transportation plans. In some cases, a trail may have to morph into sidewalks and bike lanes before reforming downstream into a trail again. But it is important that everyone knows how trails will interface with roads, so transitions are logical, safe, and efficient. And I'll just say here, sometimes more than one WSDOT funding program or source of funding will support a regional trail interest. An example is the Heritage Connectivity Trails concept serving the Yakama Nation, we'll hear about in a second. The Sandy Williams Connecting Communities program mentioned earlier is helping to support planning and pre-design activities for a 23-mile section of that concept. When it comes to construction, complete streets would likely come into play too, where the trail uses, it's a trail that's designed, where the trail uses the WSDOT right of way and passes through population centers. In addition, the Yakama Nation would likely be eligible to apply for pedestrian bicycle program or safe routes to school funding for any gaps that are done, or even that city safety program that I mentioned earlier. And the last slide here just shows the contact information. Hopefully all of these slides can be made available to whoever needs them, and just links in there for you. I will pass it on.
Hello? Okay, thank you everybody for being here today. I just want to introduce myself. Again, my name is Portia Stills. I work for our Department of Natural Resources Engineering Program, where I'm the assistant manager. But just like you, we all wear many hats. So go ahead and move to the next slide. I just wanted to show you where our reservation is located. We're in the south central part of Washington State. In the green, the orange color is our traditional homeland territory, which was ceded to the state of Washington, which consisted of just over 11 million acres. Our reservation is 1.3 million acres, and we have just over 11,000 enrolled members. I myself and an enrolled member of the tribe. So I just wanted to give a bit of history about our working relationship with WSDOT and some of the other entities going forward with the Heritage Connectivity Trails. So back in 2016, WSDOT, the South Central Region Office, approached our office for some traffic safety proposals to install 8 roundabouts along the Highway 97 corridor, which is the highway from Union down at the top, down here to top of Michigan. It continues to pull down. About 50 miles south of the top of Michigan. So we worked with them for about 2 to 3 months before going to our tribal council to present it to them. So they created a presentation, we critiqued it, they made changes and such. And then we finally thought we were ready to go to tribal council. So we went to them and they presented their information and everything. We were there for a couple hours. There were a lot of questions from our tribal council, which we were able to answer with them. But at that time, the tribal council was not prepared to approve of 8 roundabouts at all, because they did not know how the people would feel about having roundabouts along the highway and on the reservation. So they initially told us no, they weren't going to approve it. They sent us with marching orders and told us to go out and collect data to see what the people wanted. So we kind of walked out with our heads hanging low and stuff, because we did put together a really good presentation. But at the same time, we realized we have a lot more work to do. So we went out with WSDOT and we created 3 different surveys, 2 from our office and WSDOT prepared one. WSDOT joined up with us. We went to numerous community events, tribal events, and non-Indian events on the reservation and distributed these surveys.
Luckily, we had people that were very outgoing and like at the tribal community events, they knew a lot of the people. And we had goodie bags too, of course, so they loaded their arms with these goodie bags, the clipboard, and they grab a handful of the surveys. So like, for instance, one was that, they call it Spring Jam, which is a basketball tournament during spring break. So there's all the parents in the stands, right? So they load up their arms and go walking into the bleachers, go up and down the bleachers and have them, because they're captive, So they have them fill out the survey. So they come back, I need more, so they load their arm up again with bags, they have more surveys. So that's how we did a lot of our surveys. We just went to the events, we had these people that knew everybody and off they went. So we had really good responses, and so did WASDA, because they were right there with us at all these events. And then, once we thought we had enough information, we compiled all the data from the surveys. And a lot of the responses we were getting from the people were for safe walking routes. Not trails, not anything like that, but safe walking routes. Because we have people that live out in White Swan, and even out towards Fort Cisco and the Job Corps to Toppenish, that's 22 miles. And then from Toppenish to Union Gap is 13 miles. We have people that walk those roadways just to get to the doctor appointments, to get groceries, do the everyday things that a lot of you take for granted because, your grocery store is a few blocks away. But we have people that are walking. We do have a bus transit system, but the schedules don't really coincide with how people need to get to where they need to go. So they walk. And our highways, our roadways are not very safe at all. You have 2 lanes and the shoulder may be this wide and it drops off into a ditch. That's what our people are walking on. So we realized, okay, we have to do something here. So in the meantime, all this is going on over a 2-year period. We were also working with Eastern Washington University. And they came to us and said, we know you have a problem as well with the traffic and pedestrians. So we worked with them for a little bit. They gathered a bunch of data for us and numbers, and we went to our tribal council. Unfortunately, Yakima County, where the reservation is, it's the majority of the lands of Yakima County. We have the highest rate of vehicle pedestrian fatalities for Native American and Alaska Native people. And so nearly 48% of 100,000. And our pedestrian count for Yakima County is 33 out of a total of 91 for the state. Most of those numbers are coming from the reservation. So when we went to tribal council and showed them all these numbers, at that time we were just there to provide information to them. I think it was like a Wednesday, they were meeting again the next day, so they directed us to go out, come back the next day with a resolution, and they formed a tribal traffic safety committee of various employees within our agency, and also adopting Target Zero. So then, all this time, we're still working with WSTC, trying to get our roundabouts approved and working with them. So then in 2018, after the resolution was passed, forming the traffic safety committee, we hired through a WSTC grant, a tribal traffic safety coordinator. Now, she's no longer with our office, she's moved on just recently, but she completed a number of projects, safety oriented. And she also put out a couple more surveys while she was there. And again, people were asking for safe walking routes. So all this time working with WSDOT on the roundabouts, and then they were seeing all the survey responses as well, also because of their survey. We knew we needed to create some sort of pathways on our reservation. And that's where the idea for the heritage connectivity trails came through. And now it's grown into this project. Like Brian said. And we're hoping to build out 150 miles of pathways, trails, whatever you want to call it. That covers all the trails, the buffer you see in the orange color. So from Union Gap, it is not covering the Toppenish. We want to go to Toppenish, out to White Swan, see the Job Corps Center. And then we even want to build it out further and go south to Goldendale into the Columbia River. And then off of south of our reservation to Matson. Because we have people that even walk clear out of Toppenish to the Columbia River along the Highway 97 border. Dwayne could vouch for how bad that is because he drives it every day. So yeah, we have big plans, big dreams to get this built out for our people for state walking routes. Not so much for trails and such, but just to keep our people safe. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dwayne.
Thank you, Portia. So after we did all these surveys, we brought our data back to our tribal council and got a resolution to put in some roundabouts on this Highway 97 safety corridor. We got a couple of them approved. Now one's built and they're almost complete with the second one. We're moving forward with the DOT on that. The Heritage Connectivity Trail, from our surveys, the people wanted safe routes to walk and bike and that kind of thing, but also the data showed us that we really do need to get these pedestrians separated from the traffic. So we continued our discussions along with the DOT. We worked with other partners, Yakima Valley Conference of Governments, Yakima County, the cities of Toppenish, Wapato, Union Gap, the Yakima Health District, Washington State Traffic Safety Commission, Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board, the Drive and Trans Action Committees, Yakima Greenway Foundation, the William O. Douglas Trail Foundation, and the Cowiche Canyon Trail Foundation. Getting multiple groups involved just helped us spread the word around and get support. We established some planning and steering and advisory teams. Started meeting on various aspects of the Heritage Connectivity Trail. We put out some more surveys and got more data, analyzed it, and all this was all going on prior to any grants. We were just kind of working on our own there. And then in 2020 we applied for the and received the National Park Service Rivers, Trails and Conservation grant, assisted in planning and the technical assistance grant to form a conceptual plan. The initial grant went for 3 years, which we're just now completing our 3rd year. The Department of Transportation, the South Central Regional Office, that's there in Union Gap that we've been working with, applied for and received a RAISE grant for the 23 miles, essentially from Union Gap on down to the south along the 97 corridor. They're currently, working on a feasibility study, different options for the route, what kind of local street improvements and how they're going to connect into these roundabouts along the corridor. And then also connect clear into the Greenbelt trails up in Yakima and Union Gap and up in that area. So with that, I think that kind of puts us to where we're at today. We're obviously have hurdles to get over before we get a trail built, but I think There's funding out there. I think it's just a matter of getting the right people and moving in the right direction with a strong enough team that we can get this accomplished. So I think with that, I pass it on.
Hi, so I just wanted to say that what I'm gonna do is tell a story from the perspective of a small nonprofit. I love the idea of partnership. I'm so inspired by the Heritage Trail project. And we realize that all we do in life is try to solve problems, right? I mean, we try not to think about problems, but really it's all about solving problems and partnerships that make problem solving so possible. And fun as well. So my story is this, or our story is the Puget Sound to Pacific is a relatively new name for gaps in two trails from the ferry where it lands at Bainbridge Island going all the way out to the push. We were awarded a raise grant after scrambling like crazy, 3 small nonprofits hiring MIG to help us put together that application. But it was for all the jurisdictions. Nonprofits don't get raise grants. We're trying to amplify and speed along the completion of these 2 trails. So next slide. Here it is. Here's the route that goes from the ferry all the way to the push. You can see the completed sections don't have little black dots in them. The 3 nonprofits involved are the Bainbridge Island Parks and Trails Foundation, where I work, the Peninsula Trails Coalition, which has done a magnificent job building out the Olympic Discovery Trail, which is the most completed section of this entire route, and the North Kitsap Trails Association. The 2 on the either ends are working in Kitsap County, where we have the most gaps. It actually goes all the way to near Port Townsend, and that part of the route is still being determined. When I took on the Bainbridge Island Parks Foundation at that time, not Parks and Trail Foundation, kind of a long name, but I took over this small nonprofit, and really what we were trying to do is figure out how to support our park district, right? We were finishing capital improvement projects. We were trying to figure out how to bring stewardship to our parks, which like a lot of park districts at the time were taking a kind of benign neglect approach to forest land that needed management. Think of all those invasive weeds. And then the other thing was trails. And so over time, as we built the relationship with the park district and One Trust, we took on some of the roles that they'd previously been doing. And what I do now is I do a lot of easement acquisition for soft surface trails. And we've been doing a great job doing this. We realize this spine route through Bainbridge Island is the Sound to Olympics Trail. And so how do we help that along? So what we did was talk to the city and offered a grant to complete a master plan, which Parametrics is now completing, it's doing it. And that passed, and then what do we do next? How can we help? How can we make this trail be built? And fortunately, just luck of, kind of a miracle thing happened, which is Steve Durant, former principal at Alta, got involved on sections of this, or had been involved in sections of the trail route as a professional, and then retired. And yet his passion, and he's not here today, he's supposed to be here, but he is out riding around BC on his bike. So I'm here instead. And he came to us, he joined the 3 nonprofits and said, hey, what if you work together? What if you try to get a raise grant? If we can get the whole route, it's so much more inspirational than, the 7 miles on Bainbridge and the 15 miles here. And so here's the route, and once we started looking at it, yeah, we can do this, let's try, let's see what we can do. Of course, this is before we even talked to any of the jurisdictions. So, next slide.
That's it.
Okay, it won't go further. Oh, there we go. So what we have is 200 miles of trail altogether, 100 miles of gaps all the way. And what makes the story even better is that it's the western completion of the Great American Rail Trail. So it's, I think it goes almost a quarter of the way, or maybe a little more than a quarter of the way across the state of Washington. The next slide. And these are our functioning numbers, our mission. So 200, 102, 1334, and 3700. Then you can go to the next slide and see what those are. So it is 200 miles to connect Baker to Bush, plus to connect up to the port of Port Townsend, the ferry in Kingston, and a couple little routes into Suquamish tribe and to Port Gamble Slalom tribe, ending. We got the last project lined up the day before the grant application was due, when the Quileute tribe approached us and said, we want to get the trail rerouted to where our community is being moved because of the climate change, rising waters. So, and then if we can connect these basically communities in Kitsap, Powell, and Kitsap, that is 13 jurisdictions who joined us after being invited to join this grant application on 34 separate projects. Because those projects weren't our projects. We're just trying to help them get done what they wanted to get done. And we went to them and said, we're willing to pay and help put this application together if you tell us what you want done and how much money you need for it. And then the last is, again, completing the western terminus of the Great American Rail Trail. Next. So here it is. The other thing is we had to get a lead grant. Who's going to submit the grant? Who's going to actually, oversee the implementation? And that was tricky. Nobody wanted to do it. But Port Angeles stepped forward because they've had success getting federal funding for the ODT and have done a great job. Living Discovery Jail, sorry. And so they're willing, and so we now end up with 13 co-recipients, 3 counties, 2 tribes, 6 cities, and 1 port authority and Washoe. 34 components for a total. This is a planning grant only for 16.13 million. And then we did get the word in June that we received it, and now we have till 32 to support these jurisdictions in completing their projects. And this, I won't go into all of these, but this just shows you where all the projects are. All those little black lozenge shapes show the various projects all the way across. And then on the left, I don't know if you can see, but it's the city of Port Angeles, Loudoun County, Jefferson County, Kitsap County, Quileute tribe, city of Fork, city of Sequim, city of Port Angeles, Port of Port Angeles, Squamish tribe, city of Polko, city of Bainbridge, and Island and Washoe. So it's a big group, but it's sort of partnership in completion. And what's even cooler is now people are referring to it as Puget Sound of the Pacific, and I think we have a thing that will make it easier for us to continue to get funding to complete this entire route. And as we know, a trail is only as good as its connectivity. Next slide. So that's it. We were thrilled. This existed before we could put that stamp awarded on it. ps2p.org is our website, which is really just a page on the Bainbridge Islands website. So but it will get you there, and it has all the information about and even sections of the grant application. So that is the story of our partnership, and we're obviously just on the beginning of this road of getting these gaps filled, but it's an exciting place to be, and we look forward to working with more of you.
Well, thank you, Barb, and thank you to the
And the rest of the panelists for giving us some really great information. I'm sure there might be some questions from the audience. Feel free to raise your hand and I'll come walk out to you if you have any questions on the panels.
I guess a question for Brian, can you talk more about the connecting communities pilot and sort of what's kind of, how communities get invited to that, there's a thing, what's involved in that, how's that process work?
Let's see, thank you. I have the contact person for that if you want specific details, but from what I know of that program, when it first started, it was thinking about how WSTC had created a gap, the way, or a barrier, the way a river lead through a community, and obviously we needed bridges in Spokane to get across the river, and we didn't necessarily have a way across many of these communities. I can think of an example that just sticks out in my mind in Pasco. We have a state highway running through Pasco. We have bridges across it, but good luck getting across the bridges. There's no sidewalks, there's no bike lanes. You're just blocking the massive traffic getting on and off of freeways. And there's one opportunity in all of Pasco. You have to go all the way to the east end of Pasco where you can actually walk under it. Well, there's actually one place, but I think it's all sand. So you never imagine going in your wheelchair, never make it through. So that's what I think it was originally conceived of. I think it has expanded to say that we're looking at any state highway that has created a barrier for people moving across their communities. So it could actually be a linear situation too. So where we might be the only way to get from point A to point B in a community, and we don't have sidewalks or bike lanes and that kind of thing. Of course, these streets would also align with that kind of an issue. But this planning funding to be able to get out there and let the community begin thinking about what's the best way to accomplish these goals. So it's only going to involve state highways. The invitation comes in where we're looking at information, in particular, one of our major sources like RCO is the EHD, environmental health disparities mapping, and pulling other equity data in to say, are these which are the communities that are most impacted by these barriers, but also which are the communities most in need of the help to address these barriers, who may lack the capacity, planning staff, and all the rest of it to do this kind of work. So that's how we end up doing this equity analysis. And by the way, this also applies to any roads that were former state highways. I think Union Gap has, where was the highway that's going, so there's 97 and there's the one it's Main Street or Road. It just, yeah, and it still looks like a state highway. And there are lots of things that Route Vale, I think, was an old state highway. We don't even have a list of these actually, so it's a research project to figure out where they were. But when they got turned over to the local jurisdiction, nothing really changed about them. So there's no dangerous roads. They may have less traffic on them, but there's still a challenge. So we're looking at communities that are impacted by current or former state highways and that have strong equity need for receiving these funds.
I actually had a question for William and Portia. Are you playing the Heritage Trail? Were you using soft surface or hard surface?
Hard surface.
Yeah, questions?
Was that gonna cover the maintenance and operation of the heritage trail, or who's gonna cover that?
Yeah, we're still in that planning phase, should it be WSDOT, should it be the tribe, should it be the city, should it? We haven't got through all those answers yet at this point.
And I guess same question for Ray's, did you have to have a maintenance and operation plan to receive those funds, right?
The raise grant is simply a planning, grant, it doesn't, we don't have that.
Just
Plan. There's no feasibility, it's just planning and design of the gaps, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I added that a little bit. In general, I would say most of the shared use paths that are along state highways or using state right of way are owned and operated by somebody else, so a local agency. For instance, we built one going to Anacortes where there's a new roundabout, the Sharps Corner roundabout you may have gone through going to Indiana. And there's a trail along the golf course there, and that was sort of part of the mitigation of the agreement that WSDOT had to provide for all ages and abilities to get through. But Anacortes took over the maintenance of that. I don't know if that's always going to be the case, but in most cases, it seems like WSDOT has made agreements with local agencies to manage trails. Maybe they give funding. I think it's the one in Tacoma that goes across the Tacoma Narrows. I'm going to blank on the name of that one.
Scott Pearson.
Yes, Scott Pearson. Yeah, so I think we give some amount of funding and the city of Tacoma takes care of it. That's generally the case. I don't know if that'll always be the case going into the future, but.
If I can comment also, with reservation lands, you have many jurisdictions. You have individually owned tribal lands, you have tribally owned lands, you have the railroad, you have fee lands. Lots of hands in the lands.
I don't know if anybody else heard it this morning, but when I was getting off the ferry, KUOW was were playing a piece about somebody who was out, what's it, Park Gilman Trail, cutting ivy and various things, and he had all his tools behind him on his cart. And I think it does highlight a problem, which is who is maintaining trails, and it's inconsistent, and it seems to me that it's another great problem. No? Another great problem to solve, is one of maintenance. And in some countries, they develop these super maintenance plans, and it would be really great if we could have some kind of standard for maintenance, as well as I think it would support the smaller communities that don't even think about it until they're built and 2 years in and people are complaining. There are a lot of people. We're maintaining right now not the trail, but the corridor around the Sound to Olympics Trail, because we also believe that trails are linear parks. I mean, the greenways are really important for habitat to move through. They don't have to cross the highways if they can follow a trail. So we've done a lot of invasive weed work. We've planted a lot of natives. The city is very kindly watering some for us until things get well settled into the ground. But I think it would be great for all of us to work together. I've suggested this to Leaf Line Coalition. What kind of maintenance plan for all of us in these counties?
I have a question about the planning funds, the raise grant planning funds. So does any of that go to acquisition?
No,
It's just planning.
just planning and design. Yeah.
Thank you. So I guess this is a question to Annie or all of you. Knowing that we live in a state that has some serious natural hazards with tsunamis and with lahars, volcanic mud flows, that they happen. And so I'm wondering, and there with evacuation routes required for each of those, maybe for other hazards as well. And I'm wondering if any or all of you are working with emergency management on the state, county, or city levels. In Washington State, as of 2018 or 2019, a law went into effect whereby all schools within LAHAR, that is volcanic flow hazard zones, must practice evacuation, pedestrian evacuations. So I'm just wondering if you're working with them at all, and on some of your volcano missions, and what you're finding, if you're able to have some successful collaborations. Thanks.
I think this is maybe the.
I can't say that I'm a central player at all, but I've been bringing this up for years. So I used to work at a county, Island County, and you know, they've got all these communities right on the water. And how do they get out when something happens? So we would sometimes have a storm come through and cover everything in driftwood, and how do you get out of there and get to resources if you need to? And I brought this up at WSTC meetings as well, because we have a kind of our emergency management plan, a resilience plan that we're currently working on to think about the bicycle as a basic survival tool in these kinds of situations. It might be that you're pushing your bicycle up the hill, but at least you can do that. Your car isn't going anywhere, and you know we've sometimes on Whidbey Island they built a road to take care of the problem of if we have an earthquake and there's liquefaction of the highway, we need another road. Well, of course, that one would liquefy as well, and you could at least walk your bike through. So yeah, I think it is something we should think about. And if you're going to do that, if the bike is a plan, then you need stations, you know, with water or something along the way, so people could have the support they need until they can finally muster it, whatever you know, logical point for people to respond to that emergency is. I think in the past in Seattle, they were doing some really interesting bicycle emergency response drills. They were great to watch, and they have their cargo bikes, and some of them would be communications people. They go to different places around Seattle and set up their antennae to do shortwave radio, and other ones that have medical supplies, and they respond to places where they've been told that there was a medical emergency or roads you couldn't pass by, so you had to walk that road or something. Really interesting idea. But so people say it, I don't know that it's an official thing in any circles yet though.
Okay, well, I'm not seeing any more questions. Last chance for anybody. At this point, I just want to let's give a big round of applause.
Great, well, thank you very much for everything, all the great information and news, and that would be wonderful. So that concludes our official portion of the day today. You're more than welcome to stay and chat and all of that. But before we go, we of course need to look ahead to next year. And part of that, looking ahead to the 2024 conference, at the bottom of the sheet on the table is just a basic question about what kinds of things would be interested in hearing about at the conference in 2024. And if you fill that out, then you think about it, but you also have time to think about it, because I'm going to include that question again in the survey that will come early next week. It helps us as a board try to tickle out people who can talk about that, where to go look for things. In addition to, we'll be coming out in January saying, start thinking about your projects. What do you want to tell us about? What have you got really cool burning on the back burner since you told us about your last cool project in Everett last fall? So we'll do that. So on that note, we are going back to Wenatchee next fall, first weekend of October. And I'd like to introduce Matt Lyons and Lisa Foster from TRED, based out of Wenatchee, who are co-chairing our host committee. and they can have a few words. So they will be folks to talk to you. I mean, you can talk to us about presentations, but if you're wanting to exhibit or fund. And fund us, you can talk to the board, or you can talk to them as the host committee and try it. So we'll have them say.
Okay, so, this is gonna end up the flyer, but what I want you all to do right now is budget comes. Get your calendar out, put in October 3rd to the 5th, 2024, because you have to block it out now, because you're gonna get busy, and you're not gonna come, and if you don't come, you're gonna miss out on all the fun. So, try to bring the fun, that's what we're gonna do for this conference, we're gonna bring the fun. We are going to try to plan all kinds of extras around the conference, if you'll wanna come and maybe stay an extra day in one inch. Think bike rides led by the Central Washington chapter. Think paddle, the Rome Paddle Club, take you out on a boat in the Columbia River. All kinds of hiking, horseback riding, there's all kinds of opportunities, that's why Wenatchee is so great to live, because you do everything right there. So we're in the conference with Wenatchee, we're really excited about that. I'm gonna be bugging a lot of you for presentations too, because, you know, what Trend does is, if you don't know what Trend does, we're a convener, we're a communicator, we're a networking nonprofit organization based out of Wenatchee. What we do is we grab all the silos, all the land managers, all the nonprofits, we kind of force them to come together and do great work. And then we go after funding to try to help them get that work accomplished. By doing that in Wenatchee, we also started a project called Trend Map, right? So it's the app on your phone, and we presented about that in Everett. And that was over a year ago, so Mark, you stand up over there, yes, stand up, Mark. Come on, stand here. Mark Rothfire, he's the developer, right? We consulted with Dharma Maps. And then the state of Washington was the funder, right? Washington State Tourism funded it. That was a year ago. If you turn that on today, you're gonna see a whole different thing. We're really proud of it now. A year ago, it's still had a few bucks, right? But now, like I say, it's sweet. So you may know it from that as well. Regardless, we bring the fun. You're gonna enjoy yourself in Wenatchee. I'm gonna bug you. You need to present, update, all those things, and let me know what you want. Because I want the Washington State Conference to be more attractive than the Oregon. That's the same deal. We gotta start somewhere. We're gonna start with Nash. So, what else?
So on the handout that I gave you, includes the QR code to the Trend website, and we will stay in touch with the Washington Trails Coalition and keep that updated. There's a direct link from that site to their site, so everything that you need to register, present, or anything coming up in the next year will be available with that QR code. So, yeah. We're good.
See you in action.
Thank you, it's gonna be fun. Anyway, thank you all for your day, your time, your presentations, your thoughts. And stay where we can stay for, well, some of us all wanna get home, I gotta go put on the Tri-Cities like many of you do. So stay, chat, continue your conversations while the rest of us kind of clean up and have a safe drive home. But thank you again, and we'll see you in a year, if not before. All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.